This is the Best of the Bravest Nationwide Edition. It's one of the newer mini-series that we have on the program, but it's a good one because, as I've said before, this is the fourth volume of it. We've told a lot of the stories of the NYPD and the FDNY on this program, and we'll continue to. There's a lot of great stories to be told there, and some that we're learning even now after all these shows for the first time as we go. But there's plenty of stories from around the country, and even if you just look in the tri-state, Long Island, New Jersey, Connecticut, as tonight's guest is proof of, so many guys and girls with great stories of their own that have gotten it done in their careers, or in tonight's guest case, still active, still getting it done. So hence the beat profiles of police nationwide, and hence the launch as well of the mini-series, The Best of the Bravest Nationwide Edition, of which Volume 4 is tonight. And on that note, we welcome you back to the Mike the New Haven podcast. Overall, this is episode 335 of the program. And if you haven't checked out the previous episode, Detective Dave Sardi, retired NYPD, joined the program. And he came on in 1995, finished up recently, 2022, so only 2 years ago. Spent the last decade of his career in the training division for detectives, which was interesting. You look at the Detective Bureau and the lore behind that shield, and it was interesting to get a glimpse at the training that goes into brand new detectives, which can almost be like being a rookie all over again. We'll get into tonight's show with tonight's guest momentarily, but of course, as always, a couple of advertisements to run, and we're going to switch it up a bit. We'll do my consulting company after, but Billy Ryan's in the chat. He's always here, so we'll run his ad tonight first. The Mike the New Haven podcast is proudly sponsored and supported by the Ryan Investigative Group. If you need an elite PI, look no further than the Elite Ryan Investigative Group, which is run by retired NYPD detective Bill Ryan, a 20-year veteran of the department who served the majority of his career in the Detective Bureau, most notably in the Arson and Explosion Squad. So if you need a PI to handle anything from fraud, legal services, and anything else that you might require, contact Bill at 347-417-1610. Again, 347-417-1610. Reach him at his website or the email that you see here. Again, if you need a PI, look no further than Bill Ryan and the Ryan Investigative Group, a proud supporter and sponsor of the Mike to New Haven podcast. And to give you a glimpse, just before we go to the next ad, at how hard Billy works at that, think about it. So he was an NYPD cop / detective for 20 years, 84 to 04. He's been doing that, his PI business, just as long as he was in the NYPD. So 20 years on both sides of the aisle, a lot of experience with a guy like Billy, and I can attest he'll get the job done for you. So big shout out to him, always a big supporter of this show. And now we could run the ad for MC Media Editing Services. Need advice on how to start your podcast? Frustrated with the editing process? Can't find a voiceover guy? Hi, I'm Mike Colón, and I'm here to help. I'm the owner and founder of MC Media Editing Services, your premier consulting company for all things media, where I can offer you consulting advice on how to get started, and once you get started, editing, as well as voiceover work, all for a very reasonable price. If you want to reach me, you can contact me at 917-781-6189 or the email that you see listed here. I'm always available, and I'm always willing to help. Again, 917-781-6189. Why go to some giant consulting firm that's going to charge you an arm and a leg when you can just come to me? If you want to be stress-free, the way to go is to call MC. MC Media Editing Services, your premier consulting company. Okay, now my next guest has built an impressive career in the fire service and rescue services, spanning over 2 decades to be exact, in both leadership and specialized operations. Originally, his journey began in the United States Marine Corps Reserves from 1995 until 2002, and also a stint in between in Morris County Juvenile Corrections 2000 to 2004, when he would then make the switch to firefighting with the North Hudson Regional Fire and Rescue. And he has been there ever since, where he currently works as a deputy chief assigned to the Special Operations Command for the department. He was promoted to captain in 2010, battalion chief in 2017, and his current rank, as we just said, of deputy chief in 2022. In addition to serving as chief of Special Operations for North Hudson Regional Fire and Rescue, he is also the law enforcement and military liaison for his department as well. And that, for this Volume 4 of the Best of the Bravest Nationwide Edition, is current Deputy Chief Al Pratts. Chief, welcome. How are you?
I'm doing excellent, Mike. Thanks for having me. I'm totally humbled. I've seen the guests that you have on, and I'm excited to get this going. Thank you for having me.
Oh, thank you for being here. It's been a while coming, and I'm glad that we could finally link up and do this tonight for this Volume 4. And as always, for those of you in the chat, if you're watching on YouTube, Super Chat's available. Submit a question if you've got one. Same thing for those of you watching on Facebook and LinkedIn as well. Feel free to throw it in as we go to tonight's interview. So, but as we start out with every interview, before we get into your career and where your interest in service started, where did you grow up?
Yeah, I grew up in Union City, New Jersey, which is right across the Hudson River to New York City. So I grew up with a with the skyline of New York City, as the backdrop. I grew up in the city streets. It's a densely populated area. In fact, I believe it is still and has been, at least for the last 20 years or so, the most densely populated city in the country, Union City. Very diverse. I lived in a 5-story tenement building and grew up, playing ball on the streets and being out until the street lights came on um, just living in that very tight knit, kind of blue collar type of neighborhood. And I believe it was a great upbringing. I believe it was a different time, a lot different than what it is now. You don't really see the kids out in the streets anymore and that sort of thing. I don't know if it's because it's a little bit more dangerous, or just because of kids are into different things now than they were back in the day. But yeah, for me, I think it was taught me a lot of lessons, a lot of life lessons, and kind of helped build my character over the years.
Now, blue collar upbringing tends to gravitate one towards blue collar work. So, would you say that kind of upbringing is what motivated you to look towards fire service? Or maybe let me rephrase the question a little bit. Was it always the fire department for you, or did you look at police? Did you look at other avenues?
So I'll answer it this way. I never wanted to be a firefighter.
Mhm.
My thing, I wanted to be a police officer, and we'll get into what led me down that path. But during that time when I was growing up in Union City, both my parents worked in the factory in Hoboken, New Jersey, I seen the hard work that they put in, and the hard work that everyone else in the neighborhood was putting in. I remember that there was a lady that lived right down the hall from me on the 3rd floor, 809 New York Avenue, elderly lady who had, we were always looking out after her. I always kind of felt that it was, for some reason, it was my job, even at an early age, to be able to help people, to look out for other people. And I didn't realize that that's what I was doing. It was sort of something that was just, I don't know if it's inherent or if it was something that was taught to me by my parents, specifically my mother. At a young age, my parents were, they got divorced. And so, I was raised, my mother did the raising, and it was myself, my mom, and my younger sister. And I seen her work her butt off, work her tail off to be able to put food on the table and all that kind of stuff. So, I kind of grew up looking out after some of my neighbors. And then as I got older, I grew up looking out after my sister and after my mom, whereas it felt like I became the man in the house a lot sooner, or a lot younger than I don't know if I don't know if it's most kids, but I know it was pretty quickly in my upbringing. So I guess I've always had that sense of, to help other people and look out for others that needed to be looked out after. Um, and I think that's kind of like what started leading me towards that path of wanting to be part of something bigger than what I was. I played high school. I played sports, recreation. I played sports in high school and all that sort of thing. So, between having that desire to look out for other people and always being part of a team environment, I think that sort of, kind of started leading me towards wanting to do something bigger. And what that was for me early on was I wanted to be in the military. I kind of felt that that's what I wanted to do, and that's the direction that I went in before I even ever considered law enforcement or the fire service.
And that's often the hardest thing because, we've had guests from the fire service and law enforcement who have that background. And I've often said, if you can survive that and any boot camp of any of the branches, anything else after that, not to knock fire academy and say it's easy, it's not. Not to knock police academy and say it's easy, it's not. But if you can deal with the military training first before going into that, it definitely changes your perspective and it makes the process a little bit easier to square away, considering the background you're coming from. And 1995 is an interesting time to join the reserves because the nation is not at war, which is something that most kids who've grown up in the 21st century, it's unheard of, sadly. The nation has always been at war for them. I'm 24. I've grown up in the post 9/11 world most of my life. So that's been the case here. But in 95, the most recent conflict had been the Gulf War. That resolved itself pretty quickly. And you ended up being in the reserves for 7 years. So just to give a glimpse for the younger portion of the audience, For those that may not remember a time to be in the military when there was no active conflict going on, what was that like in the mid 90s?
Yeah, I guess you could say it was a little euphoric in a sense where you weren't worried about what was happening in the world. I think that your immediate concern was your neighborhood, and I think that that's why it was easy to have that very close knit relationship in your own neighborhood, is because that was your immediate concern. Your short term and long term goals were based around what you had around you, and you weren't thinking about conflicts overseas. I remember when I was in grammar school and um, you know, some of the service members were coming back from, either the Gulf War or different conflicts, and they would show up to school in their uniform. And I remember, seeing them in their uniform, and I was always super impressed with how squared away they were, the presence that they had around them, the sense of uh, accomplishment, the sense of leadership, the sense of, like I said before, belonging to something, being part of something that's bigger than you. And so, growing up and not being any conflicts, I think is a luxury that it's sort of hard to explain, but I would say that way it was a luxury. And in my high school years, when the recruiters start showing up at high school, during college, you had your college weeks, and I would walk around and look at the different colleges and universities that were there. And I knew I wanted to go to college. I did want to go to college. I was a fairly decent student. I did want to go to college, but there was something about the Marine recruiter specifically, when he walked in his uniform, uh, neatly, perfectly pressed. You can cut yourself on the creases on the shirt, the creases on the trousers, just the way that he stood and walked down the hallway. I was like, man, that's, I could see myself doing that, and that's kind of like what led me in that direction. And I took the ASVAB test, which is your military abilities skills test that will determine, number one, whether or not you can get into the military in the first place, and then number two, what type of job you would be qualified for in the military. And since there was no conflict at the time, it wasn't like it is now. Almost everyone that signs up, they're guiding you right towards that 0311, that infantry MOS. But now back then, not now, back then it was like you had all these different things to choose from. And it was like, if you did really well, you could choose from all these different jobs where, after your military life, you can, get into communications, or you can get into, engineering or sciences or something like that. And it was very appealing to me. So, I was 17 years old, and I spoke with the recruiter behind my mother's back, and and I said to him, I said, listen, I want to join, but my mom's not going to let me. She's not going to. There's no way. And because I'm 17, I need her permission. And so sure enough, he came to my house and sat down with my mother and spoke, and she cried. And but she did sign, and her condition was that I join the reserves, not active duty, and that I also enroll in college so that I do both at the same time. And that was the agreement, and I lived by that. I said, okay, I'll do it. That's the way you want it. That's the way it'll be, and that's what it was.
Yeah. And it worked out well considering what would come later. We're talking with Deputy Chief Al Pratts. This is Volume 4 of Best Bravest Nationwide Edition. Deputy Chief Pratts' current assignment is North Hudson, New Jersey Regional Fire and Rescue, where he's currently Chief of their Special Operations Command. As we mentioned earlier, if you have any questions in the chat, submit them as we go, and I'll highlight them. SBB, I see your question on Facebook. I'm going to wait until a little bit later in the show to highlight that. It's a good question. I didn't want you to think I'm ignoring it. I do see it, and I'll highlight it at the appropriate time. Now, we'll go back to the training for a second before we continue with the educational portion of your career. And the training, as we said, is no joke. It's very intensive, and no matter if you're a reservist or if you're going into active duty, Marine Corps boot camp is Marine Corps boot camp. And they are essentially breaking you down at first to build you up into, well, a Marine. So tell me about just the mental shock and the grit that you had to really build up within yourself to endure that, and some of the lessons that you feel are still guiding you from that experience to this day in your current role and even just in your day-to-day life.
Yeah, it's a great question. So they build the entire training program around shock and awe. They bust you in at dark, dirty in the morning. You don't know your surroundings. You don't know how you got from the airport to Marine Corps Training Depot in Paris Island. You have no idea how you got there. You just know it was a long bus ride. For all you know, they made 110 different turns that they didn't have to make in order to make it a longer bus ride. And you're sitting there and you're anticipating and you're stressing and the anxiety is starting to build. And then you're exhausted, you're tired, and then you show up and the bus stops and everyone is nice and quiet. And then in comes the drill instructor, and he walks in and he's got the meanest look on his face. His cover is, you can't even see his eyes because his cover is covering his, the brim of his cover is covering his eyes. And he just starts yelling and screaming right away. And then other drill instructors get on the bus and they yell at you. And then they're telling you to go right. They're telling you to go left. They're telling you stand here, sit there, jump here. I mean, it is complete pandemonium. And it is. And then for the next, I believe, 2 days, you're sleep deprived and you're going through this indoctrination process where basically all they're doing is having you fill out paperwork, right? Do all the administrative things that they need to do, get you into some sort of uniform, and then split you up into different platoons. But that process that seems seemingly simple, they make it. I mean, it's part of the training process, and it's designed to stress you and designed to make you think that basically your life as you know it is over. And then it's designed to make you question whether or not you need to be doing what you're doing, or if you made some type of terrible, horrible mistake and need to take your butt back home. And it's okay for you to feel that way. And I felt that way many times where I'm like, oh man, what did I do? Am I going to make it? Do I have what it takes? I'm not sure. But it's being put in that position that challenges you and makes you wonder whether or not you have what it takes. And then you just put one foot in front of the other, right? One step at a time. You don't think what's going to happen 2 days from now or next week or 2 months from now. You think about, how do I get past right now? How do I get past this moment, the next few seconds, the next minute, the next 2 minutes? And then you do that little by little over time. And you realize 3 months have come and gone and you're graduating Marine Corps boot camp, just putting one foot in front of the other. I mean, even when we would go out on organized runs, they would say, put them up and set them down. They're talking about your feet. You pick them up, you set them down. That's all you need to do is pick up your feet, set it down, and take one step at a time. And next thing you know, we've run, 10 miles, right? And that's life. And I believe that that's something that even now I tell my daughter, who plays very high level soccer, and she's she's in high school. She's a freshman. She's on the varsity team. I'm very proud of her. But she doesn't play much, but she's on varsity. I'm like, honey, you're on the varsity team. You're a freshman. You got a scholarship to go to the school. Your time is going to come. Just worry about right now. Don't worry about what's going to happen later. So these skills that I learned in boot camp, and that's one of them, is something that has taken me not just through my career, but through fatherhood as well. It's something that I'm starting to, teach my kids as well. Like, don't stress about what's happening. What your situation is not a good situation, and it's not necessarily a bad situation. It's just a situation. How we handle it and how we address it is what makes us who we are, right? We have to put ourselves in situations where we're uncomfortable, that we're unhappy, but become comfortable with being uncomfortable, because that's how we grow.
Right. It's not just, pushing yourself to the boundary. Sometimes it's pushing yourself past it. I'm kind of, as we were talking about off the air, dealing with that now, where, okay, in my training, have I been training very long for my career ambition of being a fireman myself? Not very. Have I progressed in that time? Yeah. Now you can look at it two ways. Either, okay, hang my head, I missed it by a set, or say, oh, you missed it by a set. Okay, so you know what your Achilles heel is, go work on it. Jocko Willink, who has an excellent podcast, a Connecticut guy, who was a former Navy SEAL. There's a great short clip on YouTube. You've probably seen it, where he's like, you failed today? Good. You have a problem?
Yep.
Good.
Yep. Good.
Because it's more of an opportunity to train. And I think that mindset is definitely easier said than done, because all of us, I feel, to a degree, especially in today's day and age, we're overthinkers. We're so busy with the long term and sometimes even the short term that we just forget the basics, which is, no, listen, one foot in front of the other, one step at a time. We'll get there when we get there. And that's something that is critical in the fire service. And as you astutely pointed out, critical in life. And speaking of something that you got to, again, at the time, your ambition is to go into law enforcement. You got a bachelor's degree in criminal justice from New Jersey City University. Now, that process at the time, it's such a great program, not just in that particular university, but anywhere you go, because even if you never go into law enforcement, it gives you a very clear understanding of what police officers prepare themselves for and the process that they, along with detectives, take, as throughout an investigative matter, whatever the case may be, whatever the matter may be comprised of. What are the key things you feel you took from that? Where even though, listen, you did go into corrections, you ultimately didn't go on to the police department. What did you most enjoy about that particular process?
Well, what I enjoyed about the process was understanding that criminal justice isn't just locking up the bad guy, right? There's a lot of different components to it, things that I had no idea about. So it showed me that there's a psychological component to criminal justice, right? Understanding what the bad guy is thinking and what motivates certain people to do certain things. Understanding that there's the different facets to law enforcement, not just police, but there's corrections and there's state, local, federal law enforcement. I think having just a broad general understanding of all the different facets that go along with criminal justice is something that I enjoyed at the time, and kind of helped me decide whether or not I wanted to, because at some point I also considered going into like private security and doing that as well, just because there's good money in it, and I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. In fact, I was looking to switch my military occupation, which was an aircraft electrician at the time in the reserves, and I was looking to go active duty right after 9/11. Me and my wife sat down and we came up with a plan to try to go active duty and leave. And we were going to go and live the active duty life. But what I wanted to do was I wanted to switch my job function at the time from being an electrician to going to Quantico and going into military intelligence. Because I said, you know what, if I'm going to go into law enforcement based off of the things that I learned in school, I was really considering doing some type of federal law enforcement, whether it was FBI or U.S. Marshals or something along those lines. And so I figured that if I was to do military intel, I think that would kind of fast track me, or at least, give me an edge over some of the other applicants. But something funny happened. My wife was pregnant with my son, who's now 22 years old. He's a senior in college. And we sat down with the career planner. Now, the career planner's only job is to get you to re-enlist at all costs. It doesn't matter if he, twists your arm and makes you do a job that you don't want to do. His job is to get you to re-enlist. And so we sat down at the career planner's office. My wife's pregnant my wife's belly was huge. She was pregnant with my son. And he looks at her, he looks at me, he looks at her, looks at me. And I'm like, what is this guy thinking? He goes, tells my wife, he goes, he's not going to be there for the birth of your son. And he may not be around for another couple of years, because again, this was right after 9/11.
Yeah.
And he says, but we have very good support groups for wives, and you might be okay with a support group. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, why the hell would he tell her this? She's going to turn around and say, hell no, we're done. Like, why would you do this? Your job is to keep me in, and it feels like you're pushing me out. So my wife turns and looks at me. She goes, let's go. We're done. And so I didn't re-enlist. I signed out and I was done. And over a few years later, I realized what he had done. He actually did us a favor. Something in him, looking at us as a young couple, we're about to have a family, and something in him said, you know what, this is not a good move for them, right? Let them do something different. And then that's what he did. And I have no idea what his name is. I can't remember, but I'm forever grateful for that move that he made. So.
Yeah, no, and it paid dividends. And I think, yeah, that probably was the strategy. You don't realize it in the moment, but I'm sure, it's a conscious decision. And it was a good conscious decision on his part to do that. So wherever he is, shout out to that particular recruiter, getting to pave the way for not only a great career, but most of all, a great family, and that's something that a lot of people haven't had the opportunity to have, because they
absolutely.
And even for people that didn't have a family situation like that, the stories that have been told in this program, deployed in late 2001, early 2002, not home until 2003, or in some cases 2004. That's a long time. You miss a lot. You miss a lot. So who knows what would have happened, right? It's always those, when you look back on your life, and or especially where things are right now, I'm sure you find yourself saying, man, what if I would have went?
Yeah, absolutely. I was done with my military career in 2002. My son was born in 2002. 2004, I got hired by the fire department. So everything kind of worked out, and at the end, obviously worked out. But even then, I was the fire department was something that just came up, and it was like, you know what, the test is coming up, and my wife called me and she says, "Babe, you should take the test." Her uncle, her aunt's ex-husband was a deputy fire chief in one of the other cities, and he says, "Hey, tell him to take the test. He's got to take the fire department test." And I looked at her and said, "I don't want to be a firefighter." I said, "I have a couple interviews coming up with the Morris County Prosecutor's Office, and if I don't take that, I'm going to sign up for the next police test. And I got a degree in criminal justice. Why would I want to be a firefighter?" At the time, I didn't realize with the pension, that you get on the job and you could always switch over, right? You could at least transfer your pension time.
Yeah.
And so when I found that out, I was like, all right, home run. That's what I'll do. I'll take the fire department test because that came up before the law enforcement test. And if I do well, I'll take the job, and I'll still take the police test, and I'll switch over. But no one switches over from FD to PD. I mean, you have a lot of cops. No, we have a lot of cops. We have a lot of guys that used to be police officers that switched over to the fire side, but it doesn't happen the other way around. And I was like, I'll be that guy. I'll be the first one to do it. And it didn't happen. It did not happen. And I had the opportunity too, because I came out, pretty high on Union City Police Department's list. And I said, no, I'm good. I got the better job. I'm happy where I'm at.
Yeah, no, and it's interesting you say that, because where I work currently, there's two guys like that. One was a police officer for 12 years. One was a state trooper, and they made the switch, over to fire. And even then, I mean, I'm not knocking them. I love them. We do a lot of emergency service unit interviews on this show. We have a mini series on NYPD ESU. A lot of those guys, when they're not being emergency service cops in the city, they're volunteer firemen out on Long Island. So They get the best of both worlds. There's always the joke, and this is not my joke, but you hear a lot of firemen say it. Inside every cop is a fireman dying to, jump out. So that's said lovingly. We love our police friends as well.
Absolutely. Listen, if I could do both, I would. If I could do both, I would. And that's kind of like how I transitioned eventually to become the department's law enforcement liaison, because if I could do both jobs, I would, because it's highly respectable, and we work together. We're on the same team. So
yeah. And if you're a fire marshal, technically you are doing both jobs. You get the best of both worlds. That's why some people go that particular route in their careers. Now, what's interesting about your department is it's not just one city, but you guys cover multiple areas. Now, for context, and you'll explain it further, Union City, West New York, Weehawken, North Bergen, and Guttenberg, New Jersey are the specific areas of the state that you guys cover. So for those that are not familiar with a county fire structure, they're familiar with county police, but I've never personally been familiarized with county fire, which is another good reason why you're here tonight. Explain the process as to why it's set up that way.
Yeah, and so there are other cities that are not part of the department that are within the same county, which is Hudson County. So it's almost like a county. It's a regional fire department, but it doesn't encompass the entire county, because we have Jersey City. To the south of us, we have Hoboken Fire Department, which is a career department, Jersey City Fire Department, which is another career department. Then to the west of us, we have Secaucus Fire Department, which is a volunteer department. And then to the north, we have Bergen County, which are volunteer fire departments. So within the county itself, we have and I left out Kearney Fire, which is also Hudson County, and Harrison Fire. So those other fire departments are within the county, but are their own fire departments as well. So we don't have a countywide system, but it is a regional department where you have 5 cities that a little over 25 years ago consolidated and created one fire department. And the premise behind that is to save taxpayer dollars, to increase the number of personnel that you have responding to every single incident, more apparatus responding to these incidents without needing automatic aid or mutual aid. Bayonne, somebody put in there Bayonne. I'm sorry, Bayonne. Absolutely, Bayonne Fire Department. Yeah, so it's like I said, it's a huge county. You know, it's a huge county. But so, like I said, over 25 years ago, they consolidated, and now you have more personnel responding along with apparatus to incidents without the need for automatic aid. So you're increasing, you're decreasing your response time. So we're getting to incidents a lot quicker with more manpower, operating safer than you would if we were having to rely on automatic aid or mutual aid all the time. And that was the idea behind it. And when that happened, that was prior to me being hired by the fire department. When I was hired by North Hudson Regional. But you know, we hear the stories, and at the time when they were merging, you know, it wasn't without its growing pains. You know, the unions got involved, and you know, one department was getting paid more than another fire department, and you know what was going to happen with the rank structure, who was going to, you know, were guys going to get demoted, were other guys going to get promoted. There was a lot of infighting when it came to that, but I think at the end of the day, well, obviously at the end of the day, it all worked out. But yeah, we will cover those 5 cities, which are some of the most densely populated cities in the country. And as far as, you know, what we respond to, I mean, you have everything from $1 million homes to housing projects. We have, you know, a couple of private, you know, we have some areas of town that you have industrial section of town. To the east, we have the Hudson River, and so we share responsibilities with FDNY Marine units, Coast Guard. We have the Lincoln Tunnel that we respond to, so we work alongside Port Authority. We have parts of the Amtrak tubes, train system that we respond along with FDNY and you know, and other agencies. And so, you know, there's a lot going on in that one little area of North Hudson or of Northern Hudson County. So, you know, it keeps us, I think it keeps us pretty busy, and it gives us a good perspective into the fire service and emergency services in general.
Oh yeah, and I love the overlap too. FDNY, New Jersey Transit Police, Port Authority
Yep.
Police,
Mm-hmm.
amongst other agencies you can see at any given job, depending on what the job is. And it's not that you're happy these emergencies are happening. You don't want to see people have their worst moment, but the volume of emergencies that are occurring in these larger cities, the more diverse the calls are, from the medical component to the MDA component to the rescue component to, of course, the box alarm and the structure fire, the more well-rounded your members are. You know, because you have a chance to work and refine on certain disciplines to where, listen, you got to be up to speed, because it's not just one city you're responsible for, it's multiple. So you got to meet the needs, and each place is different. And I imagine that's part of the challenge and a part of the joy too, measuring up, not just in general being a good firefighter, but measuring up to the needs of a given city, given that some emergencies, some calls are more frequent in one place than others. And I imagine it has to be a lot of fun for you and the guys that are getting hired both then and now.
Oh, absolutely. And you know, for the most part, the guys that are hired in North Hudson, they have to live within one of those 5 cities, because we do have a residency requirement. But there was a point in time where we were hiring from a statewide list. So we were getting guys that were transferring over from Cape May Fire Department, Atlantic City Fire Department. They were taking the test again, going back to the fire academy after they've already done the fire academy, so that they can get hired by us in North Hudson. You know, because it's a bigger city, it's a bigger fire department. You're going to more calls. You're you know, the diversity of the types of alarms and incidents that you go into, because of the things that I mentioned, because of the infrastructure in the area, because of where we are situated on the map. You know, it makes it appealing, and it makes it very highly competitive as far as, you know, seeking out that type of job and testing for the fire department.
Tell me about where you were first assigned and some of the senior guys there that really helped you learn the job early on.
Yeah, so I was first assigned to Squad 10, and Squad 10 was in West New York, or is in West New York, and that's where I spent a good portion of my probe year. And I was working for a captain. His name was Al Ballister. He was, I believe, he was in the Air Force. At some point, it was either the Air Force or the Navy. But when I got hired, all of the company officers were salty captains, gray hair, older men, older gentlemen. Not like it is now. I mean, now you look around and all the officers are young. Most of the officers are just young guys, but at the time that wasn't the case. But he was a type of officer that I aspired to be eventually, and I realized what he did to assist me and to help me kind of grow up in the fire service, so to speak. Um, in addition to whatever we were doing for the day as far as organized training goes, right? So you have a training schedule that you're following for the day. The entire fire department or the entire shift is following the training schedule. But in addition to whatever was assigned to you for the day, you had your probationary training, which was on top of everything else. But in addition to that, he took every opportunity at your regular calls, right? Your alarm activations, water leaks, things that were not actual fires. Even at fires, we would take the opportunity to have us stay just a little bit longer so that we could walk around the building. He could teach me building construction. We would go up to the roof. We would, try to pull the gooseneck away from the building. He would, teach me how dangerous it is to, climb a fire escape and that sort of thing. And, we would, stretch hose lines when, just for practice. And I'm talking 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning after the incident's over, after the fire, after everything is all picked up already and everybody's going home. We're still there, at the fire scene doing something to train and learn. And I remember looking over at some of the more senior guys and they're like, oh, here we go. Can we get this probie out of here? Because we're never gonna have an opportunity to relax, right? He's gonna, Captain Ballas is gonna find every single opportunity to train this guy, and that's all we're gonna do. And that's what we did, but having a conversation with some of these guys that are still on the job, they still, appreciate those moments because what happens is when you start seeing the younger guys and they're training and they're learning and they're asking questions and they're motivated, some of these older guys that are kind of set in their ways. And when I say older, I'm not talking about age. I'm just talking about more veteran firefighters. Once they're set in their own ways, they start getting comfortable, they start getting a little complacent, but they don't want to be, they don't want the younger guy to show them out. So now they want to start kind of stepping up their game as well, so that the younger guy doesn't know as much as they know. So it kind of helps everybody. So anytime that we go through a process where we're hiring new firefighters, or anytime that we're going through a promotional process where guys are studying for the promotional exam, you see everybody starts to get better. Everybody starts getting a little bit better. We hire a bunch of new guys. You start seeing these veterans, and when I say veteran firefighters, it could be somebody with 5, 6, 7 years on the job. It doesn't have to be a 20-year man. So, somebody with, 5, 6, 7 years, now you get new firefighters coming in. They want to show them what they know, and they start training them and they start working with them and they start becoming that senior man. And you start seeing just the improvement in operations, the improvement in training, and just improvement in morale. In my opinion, department-wide, when you start having that, changeover, new guys, fresh blood, and then same thing when the promotional, season is up, you start seeing the same thing.
Yeah, it rejuvenates guys. That's a good thing.
Absolutely.
It takes them out of that monotonous, as you said, complacent mindset. And it's like, okay, I think you know what it is. And this is not the case for every firefighter. I don't want to, and I know you're not portraying it that way either, where naturally firefighters get complacent as time goes along. No, it's not the case for all of them. Some still keep the same vigor. But naturally, listen, sometimes we do get jaded. Sometimes life and the things that you see out in the field can wear a man down. But when they see these probies coming on with so much energy and so much, vinegar and just juice for the job, I think it reminds them of what they once were. And that they were once that kid that, had all that excitement and all that ambition and all that eagerness. And, there's a fondness for that. And as long as the probie has the right attitude, that's contagious. It really helps the department out. It boosts the morale of the more veteran firefighters, as you said, and it boosts the morale of the rookies who were unsure of themselves probably in the beginning. They have a lot to learn and a lot of ground to cover to say, okay, I made the right decision. I'm glad I'm here.
Yeah, if you create that culture, right, it's a culture thing. If you create that culture, then I think what happens is you start kind of weeding out those firefighters that don't want to, be part of the process. Right. Because it's the environment is important. It's just like when we grew up as kids. If you grow up in a happy, wholesome household, right? I think that you're more likely to grow up as a happy, healthy person, right? For the most part, right? And I believe the same thing holds true with the fire service. If you take a kid out of the academy who has all the potential in the world to be, an excellent firefighter, and you put them with a crew that is not motivated, that is disgruntled, they don't want to train, they see everything as being negative, then eventually over time they start to break down that firefighter that had the potential of being great, and then they start kind of falling in line with that. Whereas if you do the reverse and you take that junior firefighter or that probie and you put them in a motivated company, I strongly believe that they're going to become motivated, and they're going to do as they're taught, right? Because they're following that example, just like at home. That's why I like being in the fire service, and as a chief officer, it's like raising another family. It really is.
And what's going to happen when that rookie firefighter gets 6, 7, 8 years in the job? They're going to do the same thing when the next batch of rookies come in.
And if they take the test, and if they take the test and they become an officer, if they didn't have the good foundation as a good firefighter, and you become an officer, just because you could become an officer doesn't mean you're going to be a good officer, right? Just because you're in charge and you're a boss, you're not a leader, right? So it's contagious for the good and for the bad. So we have to try to make it right from the beginning. I think you got to make it right from the beginning.
And that's the key for not just the fire service, especially the fire service, considering the fact that lives are quite literally on the line, but for anything, right? I'm a huge baseball fan, particularly with the New York Yankees. One of the things that made those dynasty teams of 1996 through 2000 so effective is every guy hustled. It didn't matter if it was a star like Derek Jeter or Bernie Williams or Paul O'Neill or a bench guy like Luis Sojo. Every guy approached their at-bats and their play out in the field the same exact way with the same exact intensity. It was such a culture that, hey, it was successful. They went to 5 World Series in 6 years, won 4 of them. We're not going to talk about 2001 against Arizona. We won't go there. But, nevertheless, it's the same thing in the fire service. A good attitude goes a long way. And it's a great foundation that, listen, as the old KISS method says, keep it simple, stupid. As long as you have a good culture in place, everything else gradually will fall into place too.
Absolutely. And everybody knows their role. You brought up the Yankees. Derek Jeter wasn't even the best shortstop on the Yankees. No. Right? When they brought A-Rod in, they knew you're going to play first base. You're not going to be a shortstop, even though you're a better shortstop. But you know what? Jeter's the captain, and that's the role. And then this is going to be your role. Right? And he went along. He did it. And he did an excellent job. And that's the same thing. It's like you have to know your role, your responsibilities. Where do you fit in that? What cog are you in that wheel? And if that falls apart, everything else falls apart. And that's a culture thing. It goes back to culture. It goes back to setting that precedent from the beginning, making sure that everybody is on the same page. And it's a matter of explaining what the mission is, right? You don't have to agree with everything that I do, but if I explain the mission, if I explain this is why I'm doing what I'm doing, and you don't have to agree with it, and you may have a different opinion, but if you understand why I'm doing it, I think that you're more than likely to kind of follow along and say, you know what, let's try to make that work, right? We see that in the special operations world where we have a complex incident, special operations call, complex incident, a technical rescue, and everybody has an idea on how to best manage or mitigate this incident. Everybody has good ideas. Everyone that's there is there for a reason. They have the training, they have experience, they're motivated, they're A-type personalities, but everybody has an opinion. And a lot of times we see it during training where, we have to perform some type of, technical, complex rope rescue, and everybody has an opinion on how to get it done. Well, we can sit there and we can talk about our opinions and spend 5, 10, 15 minutes talking about what is the best way, or we could identify 1 or 2 of the best ideas right away and make one of those work. And if it doesn't work, we'll adjust. We make one of those things work. You know what I mean? And so that's kind of like whether it's special operations or anything else in the fire service, people need to understand why we are doing what we're doing. And if people understand why we're doing that, then I think everyone will do whatever it is that they can do within their experience or within their role within their role to try to make that work to the best of their abilities.
Now, let's go for a second to the squad component, because you mentioned being in a squad earlier, and have spent a lot of your career both as a chief officer and as a firefighter in Special Operations Command. Now, just to get context, I know the FDNY setup with squads is within their first due area. They're an engine company. Anything outside of that, a truck company if it's second due or third due. Anything beyond that, a squad if it's citywide emergencies. Is that the case for North Hudson Regional Fire?
Pretty similar. There's one squad that fits that billet. Squad 1 in it was in West New York at the time. Now it's in Union City. It rides along with the rescue and the 2nd Battalion. Squad 1 fits that billet. So Squad 1 is first due area. You're an engine. You're an engine company. Second due area to a working fire. You're not a truck company, but you're the 5th engine, which can act as a truck company. Bring saws up to the roof. Perform primary search, secondary search, whatever needs to get done along with the rescue. So they'll work with the rescue, or if the rescue's tied up doing something else, then they're the backup rescue. So, for instance, if our rescue goes out of town for a special operations type call, then the squad becomes a rescue and rides a rescue for the city, for the town. The squad 1, in addition to having, obviously it's a pumper, but they have extrication, battery powered extrication tools on the rig as well. So if they respond to a motor vehicle accident and they have to perform extrication, they have that on there as well. The other squads that we have in the regional or in the department are the rig teams. So those, if it's not their first due, if they're not on the first alarm assignment as a first due engine, second due or third due engine, then they're responding as the rig team. And so that's their function at a working fire for the other squads that we have. So I started off at Squad 10, which was in West New York, and then I made my way over to Squad 1, which was the backup, because I knew that I wanted to make my way into special operations. I wanted to go attend the classes. I wanted to go to all the FEMA classes and get certified. And so that's kind of like what I wanted to do. So I was always interested in that. And eventually I did after my probe year. I think I was within my somewhere a year and a half to 2 years. I was able to make my way over to Squad 1 and then get trained there and then take all the special operations classes. And it was something I fell in love with right away. I knew I wanted to do something like that. That's what I wanted to be doing in the fire department, something that interested me from the beginning.
Oh, it's definitely a great place to be. But since you mentioned RIT, I've said this before on the show. I'll say it again. I know I work with some guys, and I've known some guys over the years that don't like RIT. And it's not that they don't care about the assignment. They do. It's just naturally, if you're a firefighter, you want to be active. You want to be doing something at a fire. The common complaint I hear is, well, we don't get the chance to do anything on RIT. I will say this again. If you're on RIT, good. I don't want you doing anything, because if you have to do something on RIT, that means something's terribly wrong. So,
well, yeah, to be honest with you, if you're a RIT and you're not working, and I'll explain what I mean in a second, then you're not doing your job as a rig team, because there's a lot to do, right? Yes, you're not going in, right? You're not stretching lines, you're not performing searches, but when you get on the scene and you're the RIT boss, you should be conducting a continuous size up of this building. You should be walking around doing a 360. You should be identifying what windows have bars that need to be removed, right? So that God forbid, we need to get in there and get firefighters out. We don't want to have to navigate through these obstacles that are going to prevent or make it difficult for ingress or egress. So if you're the RIT team in our department, what you need to be doing is placing ground ladders to the fire floor and the floor above, right? So that you have alternate means of egress for the guys that are inside. You listen to the radio traffic, listen to what's happening as far as whether they have water in the fire or is it getting worse, right? Because the cadence starts to change when you're listening to the radio and there's a mayday situation. It's not calm, cool, and collected. There's a series of things that start to kind of break down. We have we can't find the seat of the fire, or it's getting hot in here, or you start to hear it in their voices that something's going wrong, and then there's a mayday, and hits the fan. So if you're the rig team, you should be listening to that radio traffic. You should be every now and then you should walk around the building, as depending on the size of the building, obviously. But if you can physically walk around the building just to take another look to check the conditions in the rear or the conditions somewhere where the incident commander may not have eyes, and constantly evaluate what's happening on the fire ground, then you're not working. So like I said, guys, sometimes they tell me, well, Chief, how many ladders you want me to put up? They keep putting ground ladders up until I tell you to stop. Like if I could have a ground ladder at every window, because God forbid somebody's got to get out, I want them to be able to get out. Now, that being said, if there's a rescue situation that happens on the fire ground, chances are it's not going to be the rig team that's going to make the grab. It's going to be the guys that are working inside the building, the rescue company, the ladder companies, the guys that are inside the building that have quicker access to the down firefighter or missing firefighter are the ones that are going to make access to that firefighter first, right? The rig team's role is really a matter of assisting that initial rescue. So if a guy goes down, he's disoriented, there's a partial collapse or whatever the case is, I'm going to send the rescue company to go get him. And I'll put it to you this way, I don't need to send the rescue company to get them because they know that that's their role. They're going to hear that. They're going to listen to that radio transmission. They're going to start making their way to that down firefighter. That becomes a priority. So when that happens, then I activate the rig team and I have them work in coordination with the rescue. And then once they find the down firefighter, then they can assist with the removal of that firefighter. That's really what the role and responsibility. So you got to be ready. So if you're standing there and your hands are in your pocket and you're a rig team, you're not doing your job.
Well said. It's definitely a critical component because the faster you can operate, the better. And it's about not only responding to risk, but a lot of it is also prevention too. If you can mitigate those risks before they even manifest themselves as such, it definitely goes a long way. And unfortunately, there is a lot to learn from, not just from fires in New Jersey, but other incidents in other places over the years where that was not done so effectively, or even where it was. But unfortunately, because of the nature of the situation, things got out of control. Members were hurt or members were killed. And as Nick Palumbo says, he's in the chat, he says hi to both of us. Amen, brother. A designated RIT is a branch of safety. And yeah, he's a good guy. Is a branch of safety and accountability. And for those of you in the audience, my sister, who don't know what RIT stands for, it's Rapid Intervention Team, for those of you not familiar with that. Once again, my sister. So that being said, again, we talked earlier about squads and how well-rounded they are, how there's multiple different emergencies they can respond to at any given time. For you, either as a fire officer from your time as a captain to your time currently as a chief or as a firefighter in one of these squads, what are some of the emergencies from a technical rescue standpoint or a structure fire standpoint that stand out to you as, wow, that was quite the operation?
Yeah, so one of the fire situations that kind of stand out to me is I was a captain on a squad, and we had a high-rise fire. And we pull up and we were third due to the high-rise, and our assignment as a third due engine is that the chauffeur stays with the apparatus and assists with supplying the fire department connection, right, for the standpipes and all that. So, he stays with the rig, and me and my guys go inside, and we operate a little differently than our brothers in FDNY in the sense that we don't have the manpower that they have. I really wish we did, but we have on an engine or on the squad, it's a captain and 2 firefighters. If you're lucky, you'll get a third firefighter in squad 1. That day it was just 3 of us. Right. So I leave my chauffeur with the rig. He's working with one of the other engines to make sure that they establish a water supply and supply the fire department connection. And me and my guy, which happens to be a probie at the time, another fellow Marine, jarhead, we walk into the lobby and we walk up to the command post, and they tell us, I think it was the 13th floor. And just make your way up to the 13th floor. The hose line, they're having a hard time with advancing onto the fire. Make your way up the elevator up to the 13th floor, and then just go to work. Check in with your operations chief. There was an operations chief up there, so we take the elevator, go up to the floor below. Find the stairwell, walk up to the 5th floor, checking with the chief. He says, yeah, they're having an issue with making a headway on the fire. I said, all right. So I turn over to my guy who's a probie, and I go, you ready? He goes, yeah, he's excited, full of piss and vinegar. This guy, Johnny Worth, man, he's like a huge muscle guy, right? I'm a small guy. I'm 5'7". I'm not a big guy by any means. I said, all right, let's suit up. Let's get ready. We mask up. We see the hose line in the coming from the standpipe, and follow it in down the hall, and we end up finding the apartment. So now we're at the apartment. We start making our way into the apartment, and complete black, zero visibility. And I reach out in front of me, and I feel a firefighter, and I'm able to, with my light, I'm able to make out his name from the back of his coat, the back of his jacket, and he's like right in front of me. And I realized that they're on the line and they're flowing water and they're trying to make some progress on the fire. And from 1 second to the other, this guy jumps back, falls on top of me, and he's screaming that he's got no air. So what ended up happening is he jumps back, rips his mask off, because he was a young firefighter as well. He rips his mask off, and now he's kind of grabbing and trying to get his way out of. And remember, now this isn't just an apartment and then you're in the hallway. It's or the stairwell. It's an apartment. You got to make your way 50 feet down the hallway, and then you're in the free and clear in the stairwell. He falls back, and I realize what's happening, and I tell John to grab him. And so as we go to grab him and start dragging him out, I get on my radio, and I'm about to call a mayday situation over the radio. And as I attempt to call the mayday, he reaches up and ends up grabbing the regulator hose, the hose from my regulator, and ends up pulling my mask away from my face, and I take in some smoke. So at that point, I'm just beating him and just kind of trying to get him off of me, just to be able to get my mask back in place. And I'm able to do that, and then we grab him, take him down the hallway, get him out to the stairway, and then once we're out in the stairway, he's got his mask off and his face is completely black and bloody. And he was able to get to the hospital. He went to the burn center. He spent some time in the burn center, had some burns to his respiratory system. And he was out for quite a bit and ended up making it back. And he's on the job now. Now he's studying for the rank of captain, and he's a great firefighter. But what sticks out in my head with that situation is what you can do with minimal manpower. And I don't preach minimal manpower. I'm not here to say that, I wish we had 5, 6, 7 guys on each piece of apparatus. But kind of going back to what we talked about in the Marine Corps, when you're faced with something that you don't know how the hell your body's going to react to it, or, how you're going to handle this stressful situation, and you find a way to overcome. Like how we got from that apartment door with him to the hallway, to the stairwell is a blur. In my mind, it's a complete blur how that even took place. But it was a matter of training and working with this Pro B firefighter that I had with me on the squad. And this is something we trained on all the time. Like we trained, even though we weren't never going to be the rig team, we trained on raid operations. We trained on carries and drags. We trained on, air consumption, how to manage the air in your SCBA, how to get yourself out of a tight situation. And this is something that we trained on all the time, and that was something that, because of the training, and I think because you had 2 Marines there, I think, and the firefighter that had his ended up being a malfunction with his SCBA, which was put out of service for quite some time, and it was eventually fixed. But he also happened to be a Marine as well. But so we kind of don't let him live that down a little bit. But
actually,
but that was one, just one of many different fire situations. That one sticks out in my head quite a bit because now he has they both have families and kids now and stuff, and it's nice to see that that you made a difference in somebody's life, and especially somebody that you care so much about. In the fire service, we it's a brotherhood. It really is. It really is a brotherhood, sisterhood. It definitely is a family, for sure.
Yeah, of course. As I've learned, even though I'm currently a civilian employee where I work in the fire department in Connecticut, if they're not busting your chops, that means they don't like you. It's such a reverse from any other workplace. Any other workplace doesn't operate this way. But if you're in civil service or any kind of form of public service, they operate that way. I mean, just yesterday, we at our shifts down here run A through D. The D shift was in, and I was getting eviscerated at the watch desk, looking at you, Helen Hickey. And you know what? I'm like, you know what? As I thought about it on the drive home, I'm like, good, because if that wasn't the case, as is the case as you were talking about with your colleague, what does that say about the person? So even now that you guys can even laugh about it all these years later, it's a testament not only to the bond you guys have, but just the bond in general in the fire service, and that's good to see.
Yeah, I mean, every time we hire a new class, I tell the kids I spend about an hour with them, telling kind of going over what they should expect and how they should conduct themselves. Not just in the fire academy, but within their first year. probationary year in the fire department. That's definitely one of the things that I talk about all the time is if they're not busting your chops, they don't like you. So don't take things personal. It's part of the process. It's just like being at home, and it's like you're having your little brother or sister. You could bust their chops all the time, but you're not gonna let somebody else do that. So it's again, it's a family environment, and you have to understand that's the way it is. And if you don't like that, and it's not for you, and that's fine. It's not. This job isn't for everybody. It really isn't. So I tell guys, why are you doing this job? Is it because you want to, wear the t-shirts, or you want to have a sticker, fire department sticker or license plates on your car or something like that? Or is it because you really want to, serve, you want to be a firefighter?
Yeah, and that's ultimately what it comes down to. What is the metal inside you, if there is one, that's motivating you to do the job? And in most instances, the intention is good, and therefore the careers turn out quite well. Now, speaking of careers, being a fire officer is such a big step, and it's worth noting for context. You were promoted to captain in 2010. For those of you not familiar with the setup that they have in North Hudson Regional, they don't have the rank of lieutenant. So you go straight from firefighter to captain. It's not like most places, firefighter, lieutenant, and then captain, or even some places firefighter, fire sergeant, and then captain. So for you, 6 years on the job by this point, you'd learned a lot. You've been around some great officers, great guys. After being promoted, there always comes both two moments. One, holy crap, I'm in charge of a whole crew now, and I really got to set the tone. And two, making sure you make decisions that don't compromise their safety. And I'll add a third moment to it too, the moment where you finally feel comfortable in your rank. So we'll go one by one, and we'll start with the first one. A lot of studying went into it, a lot of prep. Just before you can even get to any of the other scenarios, you got to pass the test first. Tell me about that process in terms of staying disciplined, really digging into those books and honing down to pass both the oral and the written.
Yeah, so the study process is interesting, because that's something that I actually teach young firefighters now, how to study for and do well on their promotional exams, and also we teach civilians that are taking the fire department tests, whether it's in New Jersey and sometimes some other states, how to study for and how to take and how to pass and do well in the firefighter exams as well. But for me, it was the fact that I had an opportunity to take the test, and in New Jersey in civil service, the requirement is that you have to have 3 years on, which to me it's crazy. Like 3 years as a firefighter, they determine that within 3 years you have what it takes, or you're qualified, quote unquote, to be able to at least take the fire officer exam. And if you do well, you move up the ranks. Now, I don't think that is the best indicator of someone that has what it takes to be a good fire officer, but that's what it is, and that's the process. So I made the cut by 10 days as far as having my 3 years on. I had it by 10 days, so I barely made it to be able to take the test. And so I said, you know what? Someone has said to me once, and I say this all the time: never pass up an opportunity to take a test. If you're in the fire service, first of all, from day one, you should be constantly reading. You should, any free time that you have in the firehouse, you should be reading something, right, in the fire service that's going to make you better. So I was always reading. Even after my probationary year, I was always in the books and reading. And when the test came up, the application for the test, I said, all right, I'll apply for it. I'll take it. And I'm not going to really go all in. I'm just going to study a little bit. I don't want to embarrass myself. I'll study a little bit. And, the studying is going to help me on the job, because it's going to teach you things. Because it's not like some places that it's heavy on SOPs and rules and regulations and departmental policies and procedures and that nature. These are the textbooks: Fire Officer Handbook of Tactics by Norman, Dunn. So you're getting all these textbooks that you have to read. Also, one of the textbooks that you have in New Jersey, Firefighter Skills Essentials. So there's a bunch of different textbooks that you have to read. Brannigan. So you have this extensive reading list, which if you do it right, you take what you're learning in the books, and there's book world and there's real world, right? And you have to be able to take what you learn in the books and then apply it, on the streets, right? And so I realized that as I was reading and I was studying, I was starting to really get a better understanding of building construction, understanding how buildings are built, understanding, how fire travels, right? In addition to what you learn as a probie or with on the job. Usually on the job is your captain tells you, hey, stay with me, do what I tell you to do, right? We're going to stretch lines. We're going to be aggressive, and you kind of follow suit. And sometimes you don't think for yourself necessarily. But if you start reading and you start taking what you're learning in the books and then start applying it to what you see on the street, then you start developing a better knowledge of it. So as I started doing that, I started realizing, man, I really like this. And I think that, I could do a pretty good job of this. And I would see some of the officers that were maybe not as motivated and not as aggressive as the officers that I had when I was coming up. And I said, I think I could do a better job than that guy. I think I could do a better job of leading men and women. I think I could do a better job of keeping, my people safe. I think I could do a better job of being an aggressive firefighter and doing a good job. So, and I started kind of picking up a little bit more steam, and I really started studying and hitting the books and started getting motivated. I had a conversation with my wife, and because it's a commitment, you have to kind of put aside family time, put family time aside, and you have to be able to. And I had a young family, so it was tough to tell my wife, you take care of the kids, you do all the cooking and cleaning, you take care of the kids. I'm going to be an absent father for the next 6 to 8 months. Leave me alone. I'm going to be stuck in the basement reading. It's not going to happen. My wife's like, that's not happening, right? So I had to wake up at 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock in the morning just to study. I would read the books, I would highlight, I would type notes. And then what I would do is I would kind of record myself reading the notes. And then I would listen to myself reading my notes on my way to work or on my way home, just so that all this information could kind of sink into my head. And then I remember being in a firehouse kitchen and I'm reading Norman, and one of the senior firefighters walks past and goes, "What are you doing?" And I go, "I'm just reading." He goes, "You taking the test?" I go, "Yeah." He goes, "Learn how to be a firefighter first." He goes, "You should put that book down, grab a mop, and go mop the kitchen." I said, "All right." So I put the book down. I went and mopped the kitchen, and then I came back and went right back to my books. And I said, "I'm going to show this guy. I'm going to show him." And I did well enough where I was promoted on that first test, and I was promoted in the first round. And that was the easy part, because now you got to really do the job, and that's really where the work is, and that's the difficult part of this. Is not the studying, is not the reading, not finding time. Is actually realizing that now you got to go to work. Now this is the real test, not the civil service test. This is the real test, whether or not you can keep your people safe, right? Have that short-term goal of making sure that your whole crew goes home at the end of the day. A long-term goal of making sure that you guys make it to retirement, right? So those things are become a reality real quick the minute that you get promoted and you get assigned your first company.
And that segues into the second leg of this ultimately 3-part question, which is, and again, you can kind of answer the second and third parts on this particular question. That first operation as a captain, whatever it was, where not only you're concerned about the safety of those who have called you for this particular emergency, but also the safety of your crew and making sure your size up is effective and you deploy resources correctly. And that's the biggest thing too, the resources. You can never have enough. And then you get there and you say, okay, well, maybe we can downgrade the response, or maybe we have to upgrade. So whatever that first operation was, tell me about it, and tell me about your takeaways after the fact, where you said to yourself, okay, I handled this well, and maybe, okay, I could have done this a little bit better. I'll keep this in mind for next time.
Yeah. So I remember my first day walking into the firehouse as a captain, and I'm walking up the stairs, and I'm like taking my time coming up the stairs, and I'm like, I was nervous. I really was. And I walk into the kitchen, and I have my brand new, captain shirt, and I walk into the kitchen, and I had some kind of pastries or something, right? So you never walk into the firehouse with your arms swinging. So I came in with something for the guys, and I walked in, and I was the first one there. And so, I got there early because I would always get in early. I made coffee, and then the crew started to show up and arrive, the oncoming crew. The guys that were assigned to me were strategically assigned to me. And I didn't notice at the time. The guys that were assigned to me were seasoned veteran firefighters. You know, these guys, and it was Engine 4 in Union City, which is, you know, Union City always got all the major fires, and Engine 4 is the busiest engine in the department. And I'm assigned to Engine 4, and I got these two firefighters that are with me that have much more time on the job than me, and much more experience. And so it was a bit, you know, I was nervous. You know, I was nervous, and you know, I walked in and I knew the guys, so it wasn't like I'm walking in and introducing myself to a crew, right? I knew them. I've worked with them in the past, very little, but I have worked with them in the past. So that does make it a little bit easier that you're not just walking into like a crew that of firefighters that you never met. But when they started busting chops like right away, like to the degree that they did, I was like, oh man, I really got my work cut out for me here. I really do got my work cut out for me. But I quickly learned that every call that we went to, right, from the most basic call to a structure fire, motor vehicle accident, whatever it was, any type of incident that we went to, they were taking care of me. These guys, right? They were taking care of me. They would ask me questions. Hey, Cap, did we do this? Or what do you think about that? But so they're not, at the time, I'm thinking that they're asking me for my opinion, and they really weren't asking me for my opinion. I think they were kind of guiding me in the right direction, as to say, look, this is what I think we should be doing, without saying in those words. And then eventually I started realizing what they were doing, you know, and to this day, I thank them for that. I mean, they were an excellent crew, and now what I try to do is when I get a brand new captain, company officer assigned to me, I try to put them with a crew that's a more seasoned veteran crew, because I see how much that helps. And you know, and we, like I said, any type of call that we would go on, these guys would help me out. And you know, and we became like a family. They would invite me to their homes, or you know, birthday parties for the kids, this, that, and the other, and vice versa. And eventually they you know, I think they realized, all right, we got this young kid, he's our captain, and we got to step it up. Now we got to get promoted, and they did, and they started, you know, taking their taking it serious as far as the promotional process goes. I helped them out just a little bit, kind of guide them in the right direction with the studying. But eventually they became captains, and now they're both battalion chiefs, that very highly respected and admired battalion chiefs on the job with us. But yeah, that was like my experience as growing up as a captain, real quick. You know, being assigned with a group of guys that have their stuff together, know their job, and are good-hearted people that are going to take care of you. And then you got to return the favor and take care of them as well. You know, that's a super important part, you know, of being a boss, or being a manager, supervisor, or chief officer, is, you know, you take care of your people and they're going to take care of you, you know. And I've seen that throughout my entire career.
And that segues into your ascension to battalion chief in 2017. They often say one of the hardest transitions in promotion is going from captain to chief, because again, whole new ball game. Is it somewhat easier because now you've been a fire officer for a while and you're not going into it brand spanking new? Somewhat, but it doesn't make the transition any less challenging in terms of the new obstacles that you're going to have to face. So being a battalion chief around this time, and you were covering all three battalions at different points during the stretch, tell me about the studying that went into that and what made you want to pursue that. Because, not to denigrate the rank in any way, it sounds like a great spot, and obviously your current spot is a great spot too, but a lot of people, once they get to captain or lieutenant in other departments, that's their sweet spot and they stay there. You kept pushing further. Why?
Captain is the best job. The captain or lieutenant, you know, depending on your department, that's the best job. Because for us in North Hudson, I would say it's kind of like a lieutenant in FDNY, because you're going in, you're a captain, you're going in with the guys, you're fighting fires, you're there on the nozzle, you're on the roof, you're cutting holes, you're doing all the work with the guys that you're working with. Once you're a battalion chief, you're no longer in the crew. You're arriving on the scene, and you're outside the building. while everyone else is working. And the only time that a battalion chief actually goes in is depending on the alarms. The deputy chief will arrive on the scene and assign that battalion chief as interior operations or roof division or whatever the case is. But he's not working, but he's in there actually having eyes on the firefighters inside the building or on the roof or whatever the case is as they're conducting their operation. But for me, when I was a captain, as I started training more and more and more, and they would send me a lot of younger guys to train. I went from Engine 4 as a captain back to Squad 1 where I was as a firefighter. Now I'm squad captain, and now we're doing all the special operations training. I'm working with the rescue, and then the department at that time, they bought a new truck, a new tower ladder. In fact, Mike Chiampo came over and did all the tower ladder training with us. And when we started working on the tower ladder, I was like, man, I want to work there. So, and that's also that ladder 3 in West New York was also part of the special operations units. So I said, you know what, perfect thing. I want to be on the roof. I want to be on the ladder company, and that's what I want to do for the rest of my time as a captain. And and it's also part of special operations, so it's like perfect. And so I put in for that, and I got the position. But when that happened, the department started asking me to put some things together, some large area rope search training together. I started training more and more, working with the department to train a larger group of people versus just my crew. So as I started doing it, and I started kind of transitioning to, I wasn't a training officer for the department, but I was working with the department training officer to put training programs together. And I enjoyed that so much because I said to myself, you know what? I'm not only working to make my crew better, I'm working to make the department better. So I realized that once you start transitioning into these roles and start moving up the ranks, the amount of people that you can affect, the amount of people that you can have a positive impact on, and the amount of change that you can possibly make is on the larger scale. So I said, if I move up the ranks and I move up to battalion, then I can possibly end up doing special operations and then end up, changing this, changing that, helping the department kind of move in a direction where I felt that we needed to kind of step up the type of training that we were doing, maybe improve on a couple things here and there. And so I said, you know what, I'll take the battalion chief's exam and, see how I do. So,
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, it's worth noting around this time, a few years prior, 2013, you had also begun your tenure as an instructor at the Monmouth County Fire Academy. Now, in line with that, I wanted to ask you, how do you feel that gig allowed you to better communicate as a fire officer, particularly once you made chief?
Yeah, absolutely. Because when I started working in the fire academy, and I was working for my former boss. So when I became a captain, my deputy chief was Anthony Avillo. And Anthony Avillo ended up, when he retired as a deputy in North Hudson, he went to take over the Monmouth County Fire Academy. He calls me up. He says, you know what, we got a couple of positions. I would love for you to come, work for me here at the Fire Academy. And I said, yeah, that's perfect. And I said, I wanted to be a fire instructor. I have my fire instructor certification. And so I went and I started working at the Monmouth County Fire Academy. What was good about that was that it allowed me to get in front of an audience. It allowed me to get in front of people, and it allowed me to teach things that I didn't want to teach. And what's good about that is teaching something that you don't want to teach. And what I mean by that is there's some of the more boring chapters in fire school, right? Fire communications or fire history, or standpipes and sprinklers. Like, nobody wants to teach that. Unless you're a sprinkler guy, and if you are, I don't mean to offend anybody, but my wheelhouse was ladder company operations, rig team, this, that, and the other, rescue. That's what I enjoy doing. But what I would do is I would sign up for these classes that were a little bit more difficult to teach because of how dry the subject matter is. And that would kind of help me get comfortable with speaking in front of a crowd of people, a group of people, a class, and be comfortable, with material. And eventually that would help me with the oral boards when I was moving up the ranks to take the test for battalion chief and eventually deputy chief. But what was great about working in the fire academy is that it kept you fresh, right? You were doing whatever was new in the fire service, whether it was the studies on flow path, different types of nozzles that we were using, different techniques, like these things that we were teaching new firefighters, you're now doing hands-on yourself as a fire instructor. And so I would sign up for these classes to teach these classes. And then as I moved up the ranks eventually to battalion chief, and I was no longer actually fighting fires, I would sign up for as many live burns as possible. So I would, be an instructor at a live burn. So I'm actually physically doing the job that I can't physically do at work in North Hudson, because once you're a battalion chief, you're not stretching lines anymore. You're not pulling ceilings. You're not doing that. So I would do that in the fire academy just to keep myself fresh, so that when I'm teaching somebody at work, or when I'm making sure that we're getting it done right, I have that hands-on experience. And because a lot of it is muscle memory. And even though I say it's like riding a bike, you never learn, you never forget. I don't believe in that. I think everything that we do in the fire service is repetitive in nature to some degree, and I think we have to do it over and over and over again, build that muscle memory. And if you stop doing it for a while, you got to get back in it, because it's definitely a perishable skill, I believe. So I think that was something that for me kind of helped me stay fresh, helped me stay engaged, and stay motivated, and just kind of have a greater admiration and love for the fire service.
2019, you take over rescue operations, and I'm sure you came into that with a game plan. And you can look in general, you can look at a situation and say, okay, here's where we are, here's what's good, here's what needs improvement. You've been in special operations a while, you've been a captain for a while in it, 7 years to be exact, you've been a chief for a couple of years now. So when you got the chance to oversee rescue operations, tell me about, again, the short-term and long-term game plan of, okay, I like what's going on with this, but I think we could do better with that.
Yeah, so when I took over as chief of rescue operations, there was a deputy chief that had done it prior to me, Anthony Venezia. He was the chief of rescue operations, and he kind of passed the torch to me. Kind of sat me down with the chief of the department at the time, Frank Montaigne, who is one of my partners with Promotional Prep. Now he's since retired from North Hudson. They sat down with me and they said, look, we think that this would be a perfect fit for you. Being that you have the rescue and the special operations background, you're now a battalion chief, and you've been heavily involved in training and helping advance and move this department in the right direction. We think that's something that would be a good fit for you. Traditionally, that's a position that is a staff position. So in other words, you work out of headquarters. It's not something that you're not going to go on the line. You're not going to work in the field with the guys. You're stuck at headquarters. So I said, you know what? As much as I want to do special operations and I want to be, I want to run special operations, I have a lot of good ideas. When a position opens up on the line and I get an opportunity to work as a street battalion, I want to be able to go do that job, and then I will continue doing rescue operations as a battalion chief. I'll do the extra work. I'll do whatever needs to get done. As long as you guys support me with it, I'll continue doing it. And if it becomes something where I'm not being productive or it's not working out, then by all means, we'll give it, let somebody else take it and run with it. So they agreed. And I was in headquarters, assigned to headquarters when I first got promoted to battalion chief, because usually you do a stint in headquarters. I've been lucky where both times when I got promoted to battalion and deputy, I only did 6 months in headquarters. And that's not to say anything negative about headquarters. I mean, there's a lot of work that happens in headquarters, and administrative work, and I mean, there's unsung heroes. However, my job, I felt that I needed to be out in the street with the guys, right? I can't be behind the desk. I got to be out there physically doing the work. So my time came up, and I went out and I was covering 3 battalions, but I remained as the chief of special operations. One of the first things that I did to change what we were currently doing was put together a rescue task force for active shooter response, because I got sent to a class, an active shooter incident management class. And while I was at headquarters, I went and took this class, and I said, man, based off of where we work, with it being a prime target for bad actors, prime target for terrorism, how do we not have some type of active shooter plan in place? How are we not working with our local law enforcement partners to make sure that if, God forbid, there's a shooting at a school or at the mall or at the hospital or whatever the case is, that we don't have a plan in place to get in there and effectively rescue these people, right? and get people out to the hospital. So so I came up with a plan on how to put an active shooter program together. I sat and I met with the unions. I discussed with them what my plan was. I was basically using national standards for active shooter response. It wasn't like I was reinventing the wheel or anything like that, but I had to change a couple of things because of the the makeup of my fire department. And so I sat with the unions and I came up with a plan. And they said, okay. They said, as long as you run the rescue task force, we'll support you as a union. We'll support it, right? Because it becomes a collective bargaining question and all that. Anything you do in the fire service. And so they I had basically their blessing. And then I went to the chief of department and I went to the directors and I said, look, I believe this is what we should be doing, and this is how we should put the program together. I had written a draft SOP, and make a long story short, they approved it. And then I started working with the local law enforcement officers, working with the county SWAT team, and I started developing MOUs, memorandums of understanding and agreements, to be able to have a written document between fire, EMS, and police to be able to make sure that we have the proper training, B, continue with that training throughout the year, and then see if we can identify the responsible parties as far as who's running the show, who is making sure within each specific jurisdiction that they're keeping their members trained, and that we constantly work together, train together on not just actual hands-on active shooter drills, but that we're also training on incident command, unified command, and things of that nature to make sure that we have that interagency operations going on. And so that was a sort of like the first major thing that I was able to get done as the chief of rescue operations for my department.
Deputy Chief Alder Pratts is our guest tonight, for Volume 4, the Best, the Bravest Nationwide Edition. 2 questions in the chat that we'll highlight. The first one, as we mentioned earlier, SBB via Facebook will highlight his question or hers now. And he or she says, ask the chief about his involvement of apparatus purchasing and how it transfers over to operating more effectively on the fire ground. Also, ask the chief how important it is to have rescue and squad companies in the same firehouse.
Mm-hmm. That's a great question. So the other thing, in addition to the rescue task force, I had the pleasure of being intimately involved in purchasing our rescue truck. We bought a Ferrara a rescue truck. It's a walkthrough, a beautiful piece of apparatus. And so my involvement with that was kind of specking out and speaking to different manufacturers, understanding what it is that we needed for our specific department. We have the second hilliest city in the country, like outside of San Francisco. We have huge, steep hills in North Bergen. We have very tight streets, extremely tight streets, making it difficult to make turns. We have a section in Union City that you can't drive down the block without going over 5 or 6 different speed bumps. So the reason why I mention that is because when you start purchasing apparatus, you got to consider the terrain, you got to consider your response area, you got to consider how busy that department or how busy that company is going to be, how many calls are going to go on. When you're looking at rescue units, you're looking at what kind of equipment you're going to store on that rescue truck. So you got to think about storage space. You got to look at weight restrictions, things of that nature, making sure that the chassis is going to be able to handle that extra weight. Chassis is going to be able to handle all the speed bumps, that you might have to knock out the bumpers at 45-degree angles so you can make turns, and things of that nature. So I had never been involved in the purchasing of apparatus. We have a chief on our department that handles purchasing apparatus. He happens to be one of my battalion chiefs, Al Salveson. So he's always been intimately involved in that. But because it was a rescue truck, obviously that I played a major role in that. So I was able to pick the committee, and I was able to pick company officers and firefighters from different shifts, so I can have everybody's involvement, be able to pick members from the union for them to be involved in it as well. And so just went through the process of deciding what we needed, what type of apparatus we were looking at, getting quotes, getting bids from different manufacturers, and then ultimately deciding what we were going to go with. And even down to the color scheme of the apparatus and, how it was going to be designed. If it was up to me, we would have had black rims and black bumpers and all that kind of stuff, but that's an extra cost that the department wasn't going to give me any leeway on. But, trying to get the best piece of apparatus that you can within whatever, financial restrictions that your department has is definitely a challenge. And purchasing an apparatus today versus when we bought this rescue truck, which I believe was, we've had it now for, I want to say 3 years. Purchasing it now, I mean, everything is double the price, takes double the amount of time to get it. And it's so difficult. I'm glad I'm not involved in apparatus purchasing now at this point. But in addition to that, we also went with a brand new Squad one through the same manufacturer, Ferrara and FF1, and we ended up speccing out and customizing an engine company that had specialized compartments for extrication equipment, and we went with battery operated extrication equipment. So on the rear, two of the rear compartments on the driver's side has specialized battery operated extrication tools and equipment and stuff like that. And so, I was involved in that process as well. As far as, I think that the follow-up question was, how important is it to have both in the same firehouse? I think it's extremely, extremely important to have both in the same firehouse. I think it's, I want to say it's obvious, but the reason is because, number one, you have that cohesiveness. These guys are going to major incidents. They might be getting called to a structure fire, or they may be doing an elevator rescue on Bergen Line Avenue, where the platform is 168 feet down from street level. And you may have to use specialized equipment and tools to get it done, or it might be responding to a car into a truck into a building, or a truck that went through 3 levels of a parking garage because they decided that they were going to ignore the weight restriction signs on this parking deck. So having them respond to these incidents together is really only possible if they're responding out of the same firehouse together. Other than that, it becomes very difficult to make that happen. The other thing is these guys train together all the time. And in the firehouse that we have, our squad, our rescue, and our second battalion chief, who our second battalion chief is a chief that's trained in special operations. You drive past their house at any given time, their bay doors, if they're not out on the call somewhere, their bay doors are open. They have a Arizona Vortex set up. They have a dummy on a Stokes basket. They may be going off the side of the building, off the roof. They're always doing something in addition to whatever training that they're assigned. Like every Tuesday of the month, we have task forces. Task Force Tuesday is what we call it. So every Tuesday, we're doing task force training, which is specialized special operations training. That takes precedence, that takes priority over any other training that's happening that day. But in addition to that, I don't care what time of day it is, or even if it's not a Tuesday, these guys are out there doing that. So you have like-minded individuals that are motivated, that motivate each other, and they're in the firehouse together, building that camaraderie, that brotherhood, that sisterhood. And those are some of the best guys and gals that we have, in my opinion, in North Hudson are the ones that are in the special operations units. Obviously I'm a bit biased. If it was up to me, I'd have all the special operations units that we have under the same roof, but it's just not possible because we have Rescue 1, Squad 1, Ladder 3, Ladder 4, and Squad 10. So those are 5 different units. It's just impossible to have them under one roof. But if it was up to me, they'd be all in the same house.
Secondary question comes from my captain, Jake Urban. He is our training and safety officer for the West Haven Fire Department. Captain Urban asked, who does the chief look to for mentors, and what is his advice for naysayers? Thanks, Captain.
Yeah, so who does the chief look for mentors? So I'll say this a couple of times. So I know that when I first got promoted to captain, my deputy chief, I mentioned this before, was Anthony Villo, and he assigned another captain to be my mentor. And so that captain that was my mentor was somebody that we had a lot in common. He was also a special operations kind of guy. He was motivated, military, and so we kind of hit it off pretty quickly. And then anytime that we had a new captain assigned to us after that first year that I was being mentored, he would assign me to them so that I can mentor them. So I think that what a chief looks for is someone that can motivate others. I think he looks for somebody that is also self-motivated and has a love for the job, because you know what, you got to have a love for the job, and that's got to be number one. Somebody that is selfless, somebody that is willing to do extra work, somebody that is somebody that's a leader, basically, right? Somebody that has those leadership abilities, because it's super important. If I'm gonna identify whether it's a firefighter, senior man, or whether it's a captain or another chief officer, to work with a younger officer or upcoming firefighter or fire officer, I want to make sure that they're going to get the job done right. So it's got to be somebody that is has no ego, somebody leaves their ego at the door, and somebody that's just willing to do the right thing. I hope that answers the question. It's a great question, because I think that sometimes you identify somebody that's going to be a good mentor, and you don't really kind of think about what skills that they have that identify them as a good mentor, but you just kind of know that that's the person, that's the guy. Usually somebody that everyone else is going to look up to, someone that's going to lead by example. Because you'll have that where you have firefighters that say, they'll talk the talk, but they're not going to walk the walk. So I think that's probably, I hope I answered it, but I think that's probably the best person to mentor young and up and coming firefighters and fire officers.
Covered it well. Thanks to both SBB and Captain Urban for submitting those questions, respectively. A couple more things I wanted to hit on before we get to the rapid fire. One of them is the very shirt you're wearing. We'll talk about promotional prep momentarily. But sticking on operations for a moment, you promoted to deputy chief in 2022. And one of the things I wanted to ask you about is maritime operations. I feel that's timely. Very tragic fire in New Jersey not too long ago, where 2 veteran firefighters were killed aboard a ship fire. So in essence, again, we talked earlier about prevention. Nip these problems in the bud before they become problems. And unfortunately, in the fire service and in a lot of different jobs involving civil service, it's the fatalities in the line of duty that you'd never want them to happen, but unfortunately they do. And if there is a silver lining to them, it's at least you can learn from the incidents to make sure the same event does not repeat itself. I'm sure this training was going on beforehand, but in any event, how did that particular fire and the loss of these 2 fine men in that fire in the line of duty change the way you taught maritime operations and are still teaching maritime operations?
So it's crazy that you asked this question, and we haven't had a conversation about this, me and you offline on this, but I was actually there at that incident at the Newark ship fire when we lost two brothers from Newark, and so as a chief of special operations, I sit on the committee of the UASI, which is the Urban Area Security Initiative. We have a Metro USAR strike team. The Metro USAR strike team is comprised of 11 fire departments from northern New Jersey, all career departments, northern New Jersey, and Port Authority, ESU. So it's those 11 fire departments plus Port Authority, ESU. We all have specialized heavy rescue fire trucks that after 9/11, right? After 9/11, through grant money, we were able to purchase these trucks. And with these trucks, you have specialized equipment and a specialized training, obviously, that goes along with it. So these 11 fire departments all make up the Metro USAR strike team, which is a picture that's kind of in the background there, where these 11 fire departments will respond to or can respond to major incidents throughout New Jersey. These major incidents can be building collapses, trench rescues, confined space, and anything out of the ordinary that requires specialized equipment and manpower. So as Chief of Special Operations, I'm also fortunate enough to sit on the committee, which is the Incident Command staff. I'm part of the Incident Command team for the Metro USAR Strike Team, and also the Planning and Training Committee. So anytime that there's a major incident in New Jersey, departments, whether they're paid, career, doesn't matter. If they have an incident in their jurisdiction that requires specialized equipment, specialized training, they're able to, through Union County Dispatch, they're able to make a request and have us come out and assist with, shoring. Like, let's say you have a truck into a building and you have victims inside that building or in the truck. You can't just go in there and start pulling people out. You have to be able to shore up the building. So we have that capability, and we have the training to be able to respond either as a single unit, a unit of 2 or 3 units, or a full response, depending on the size and complexity of the incident. That being said, on that night, July 5th, when these 2 brothers from Newark lost their lives, I was home. I was on vacation, and I had been on vacation for about a week or so. At that point, I had a full beard. And I was sitting in my house and watching TV, and I start getting messages on my phone because as part of the incident command staff, we get messages anytime that there's a major incident happening in New Jersey. You start getting messages on my phone that there's a major ship fire in Newark, and I'm watching this and I'm looking at the messages, and all of a sudden I see reports of people, firefighters trapped, Mayday, so on and so forth, and and then my buddy, who's a deputy chief in Patterson, who lived around the corner from my house, AJ Woods, who's also on the USAR committee with me, calls me up and he's like, "Hey, Al, you listening to the, are you watching this?" I'm like, "Yeah, I just saw the text messages." And as we're talking to each other, we get a text message that Newark had reached out for one of our specialized rescue units. So being that we're on the incident command staff, anytime that one of our specialized rescue units is requested, regardless if it's our city or not, we go. Like the members of the command team, we make our way. We start going out to the incident. The reason why we go to the incident is so that we can assist the incident commander with, staging, manpower, resources, any additional, because not everyone knows what we bring to the table. So we would show up and they know who we are. We would show up and say, "Look, this is what we can provide you. If this is a major incident, we'll fill out the assignment and make this a major incident and call all the resources that we have." We'll bring radio communications, we'll bring logistics. I mean, we'll bring everything to the table, almost sort of on a smaller scale of what, New Jersey Task Force 1 or the other FEMA teams, New York and Pennsylvania, that they've just gone out to North Carolina ahead of the hurricane that's coming up the country. So that night, as soon as I saw Mayday and firefighters trapped, and they reached out for one of our rescue units, he swings by my house, he picks me up, I grab my gear, grab my equipment, and we go. It's a very long story, but to make a long story short, we ended up at some point working alongside their command staff that they had set up. Once they've already realized that they still had one firefighter still missing inside of the ship, once we identified that there was one firefighter still inside the ship, there was sort of like an operational timeout where they started pulling all companies out to try to regroup and then try to figure out what the next steps were going to be. But with us, with the training that we have, specialized rescue training, we came up with a plan, and one of our committee chairpersons, Chief Seaberger, he said, "You know what? Let's treat this building, or let's treat this ship as if it was a high rise. And let's set up operations in the ship just like we would in a high-rise building, so we could break it down into manageable pieces." And then Chief Woods ended up being a rescue operations branch, and I decided to go inside the ship and run the rescue and search operations from inside the ship. So once that was decided, we made sure that we had enough radio communications to be able to get the job done, because once you're inside the ship, those state radio channels that we were using weren't making, the transmissions weren't getting out of the ship. So we had to set up a talk around channel so I can set up communications, communicate directly with rescue branch, which was Chief Woods, let him know what I had inside the ship, and then he could radio that information or relay that information through the state USAR channel. I went in with the North Hudson, with my guys from North Hudson, and they went in as the RIG team at that point, right? Kind of going back to RIG team stuff. They went in as a rig team at that point because there was a department that was in there trying to do a search for firefighter Brooks. At that point, they were doing large area rope search inside the ship. Conditions were less than favorable inside the ship. It's like being inside of a tin can that's burning. But we were able to get into the stairwell, make our way up, and then as we made our way up to the deck where the search was being conducted, that department that was in there conducting the search, they started running out of air. So now they came out and they went out for rehab. At that point, I sent my guys in to continue the search and then started backfilling other companies from the 11 towns that we had there to come in and start, making sure that I had a rig team in place, making sure that I had additional companies ready to work so that we can keep rotating companies as much as we could. At that point, I was told that we had FDNY units coming up, making their way up the stairs. And at that point, I look down the stairs and I see a very familiar face smiling up at me as he's walking up the stairs. And it was Chief Malcolm Moore. And I know him from a committee that I sit on, a couple of different committees that we both sit on. And I see him coming up the stairs and he looks at me. He's like, "Ow." I said, "Man, I'm glad to see you here." I said, and I explained to him what was happening. Right behind him was Chief Downey. I'm like, "Oh man, this couldn't be any better for me as far as having," because I was the only chief officer inside that ship at that point, and I have firefighters and company officers reporting to me. And, I knew at that point that based off of the number of units that we had working inside the ship, that my span of control was already out the window. So as soon as I had seen these guys coming in, I was like, "Oh man," I felt so good about that. So I said, "You know what? North Hudson's doing their search. They're making their way through the ship. They're making their way towards where we think, down firefighter is." And he says, "Well, I got, and I can't remember the rescue. I think it might be Rescue 3, Rescue 3 Staten Island, I believe."
Rescue 3 from the Bronx.
The Bronx. Okay, so it's not right. Well,
Rescue
I'm sorry. I apologize. It might have been Rescue 5. So he had a rescue company and a squad company with him. And I said, "You know what? What I'll do is I'll send your rescue and your squad. They'll do the next search." And then I believe it was Hackensack Fire Department that was making their way up. I said, "They'll be the rig team for your guys." And that's exactly what we did. Luckily, they picked up right where my guys left off once they were done with their search, and they were able to find, there you go, Rescue 5. All right. And they were able to find the down firefighter. All right. They did a good job. They found them. They radioed to us, and we were able to, get additional firefighters there to help them package the down firefighter, Brother Brooks. It was just a crazy operation because, we've been in fires in high rises, been fires in all types of structures. This was something that we've never, dealt with before. While this is happening, the fire's burning above your head on the deck above. And then eventually we ended up getting him onto a Stokes and then bringing him upstairs to the top deck, which was like a frying pan. And what was crazy was that the guys that were up there were manning hose lines, keeping flooding that top deck because the fire was burning right underneath. So if you can imagine, you're standing on a frying pan, basically. You could feel it was like 6 inches of water when you got up to the top deck, and you could feel how hot the water was. But you know what? Between FDNY and our guys that we had working there, we were able to get them over to the port side of the ship, repackage them that way because we know that we were going to use rope rescue to get them over to the side of the ship, repackage him. We found a American flag, draped it over him, packaged him. And I remember communicating with one of the ship's crews. And I said, "Listen, as we put this firefighter over the side of the ship, I want you to take the floodlight and just kind of follow him down with the floodlight," because he had his Newark brother firefighters waiting down below to receive his body. But that operation is one of 33 special operations calls that the USAR strike team went on within the past year. What was great about this one was the fact that we dealt with a situation that we never dealt with before. And the fact that we had that interagency coordination working seamlessly with our brothers from across the river, I thought was an amazing thing. In fact, after that, they actually extended an invite to us. FDNY extended an invite to us to come out to the Rock, and Chief Moore put together an outstanding 3-day managing the Mayday type of training for us, where we had it was the command staff, and we were able to invite chief officers from the 11 fire departments plus Port Authority ESU to be able to participate in that operation where, we work with these, what a great facility, what a great group of guys. Humble, down to earth. So I'm definitely grateful, and big shout out to Chief Moore and Chief Esposito on their recent promotions. Both guys came up through the rescue and special operations and everything like that, and so I definitely look up to those guys.
Yeah, no, Chief Esposito in particular was original Squad 18 guy when they got made into a squad in 1998, and he had Jerry Tracy as his commanding officer for a while. So if there's ever a good person to learn from, it's a guy like that who's still in retirement, still possesses so much knowledge. As we said, we would also touch on this before the rapid fire. And thank you for touching on that. I had no idea you were there. So I appreciate you going into depth on that. I know it was a very difficult night, but the audience and myself do appreciate both your efforts that night as well as those of all involved. Promotional prep is something you got involved with in 2020. It's something that you are also involved with on social media. And if going off the name, again, a lot of people want to be officers, but there's an intricate process involved in that, as you well know. Tell me about your involvement in that.
Yeah, so I've been involved with the company. I'm now one of the managing partners of Promotional Prep, and like I said before, we have a few different programs where we have a training program that's designed to train civilians how to take the how to take the entry level firefighter exam. There's a science to it. It's not just something that when I was taking these exams, 20 plus years ago, I didn't know that this existed. I didn't know there were companies out there. I went online, I looked for a book, or I went to Barnes and Nobles and bought a book. Right? Amazon definitely didn't exist back then, but I went out and bought a firefighter, exam book and studied it, and none of that really helped. So having an understanding like we do with the testing process, having us been through the testing process, having worked with different departments in different states with their testing process, having that SME, that subject matter insight, is extremely helpful. But like I said, we teach people how. My own son is taking the fire department exam and sits in our classes as well. In addition to that, teaching firefighters how to take the promotional exam, whether it's to lieutenant, to captain, battalion chief, deputy chief, and chief of department. We even put a program together specifically for Philadelphia Fire Department. We got together with some of the guys in Philadelphia, got a great understanding of what their testing process is. Different from what we do in Jersey, because they focus a lot on their directives, their policies and procedures within the department and that sort of thing. But just getting an understanding of how they do it, and then us being able to integrate what we bring to the table as far as how to read the books. I know people are like, what do you mean read the books? You just read. No, there's a way that you need to understand how to read the books, because the test assessor is reading it in certain terms. So you have to understand how a test is developed. And when you understand how a test is developed, then you know how to read the books and you know what to look for. You know what within the text you should be highlighting and taking notes and saying, what, this is something that they can ask me on the test, whether it's multiple choice, or maybe this is something that they can ask me if it's a scenario for an oral board. And so we do a lot of that work with our students. And in New Jersey, with our company officers, there's a company officer and battalion chief. There's a multiple choice test that you take, and it's a scenario-based multiple choice. So you'll have several scenarios that they'll give you a fire scenario, different types of fire scenarios, and then they'll have multiple choice questions that are associated with that scenario. So you have to kind of look at the question itself and look at the scenario and determine which is going to be the best answer. And then if you pass that, then you're invited to take the oral assessment or oral presentation, where either you're sitting in front of a board or you're being recorded and you're given a scenario. There's a certain amount of time that you can read and take some notes, and then you have to be able to provide a response. And depending on the rank that you're testing for, you'll be a company officer of a ladder or a company officer of an engine, and you're given a task or assignment to do something. How do you handle that responsibility? Second question is usually something goes wrong. How do you handle that? Could be a stair collapse or flashover or whatever the case is. How do you address that? And the third question is usually a supervisory. Then you're given another scenario where you're the incident commander for the duration, because you have to know the job and the responsibilities of the rank above you as well. So, and then for the deputy chief and chief of department is just an oral board. There's no multiple choice, but you have to go through all the books, chief officer handbook of tactics. There's a ton of books that you got to read through, pretty extensive reading list, but you have to be able to answer scenarios based off of, fires, administrative, supervisory, and leadership type questions as well. So, we do a lot of work with firefighters throughout the state of New Jersey for different ranks. And what's great about the program that we have is we have a lot of firefighters, fire officers, chief officers that send their kids to us. The other day we ran a firefighter program, and I asked that question. I said, how many of you guys, raise your hand, how many of you guys were sent here by your dads, by your uncles, by somebody in your family that's on the job? And almost everybody raised their hands. I mean, everybody's, because our job and our goal is to, number one, help people become firefighters by doing well in the test. And then once they become firefighters, we want to help them move up the ranks. So we want to keep it all in the family. So that's we pride ourselves in that, in being, local, fire chiefs. My partner is Mike Turpak, he's written textbook. Mike Turpak. Okay, he's the principal partner. Frank Montaigne, who's retired from North Hudson. They took me under their wing, and they wanted some fresh blood, and I brought something new to the table. But yeah, man, they've been doing this for a long time, and I was very fortunate to get linked up with these guys. But yeah, it's an excellent company, and I think that our results, the fact that we're local New Jersey, current and retired fire chiefs, still doing this, and I think it's, says a lot for sure.
Absolutely. And we covered a lot with that tonight. And really, all aspects of training. It was a very well-rounded conversation. Actually, before the rapid fire, you did send me some photos, and we'll go through them, and producer Vick will highlight them as we go. One of them is our background tonight, which is the USAR team in action. And where was this taken?
Yeah, this was East Rutherford, New Jersey. There was a worker that was working in the basement of a building that was being renovated. The building was, over 150 years old or something like that. It was the old railroad cafe. After this, it ended up being demolished. But if you can kind of make out in the yellow, he's wearing like a fluorescent yellow shirt with a red. So he was working, and he was doing some excavating. This is inside the building, and as he was doing some excavation work, I believe he was just using some hand tools. Part of the retaining wall came down and pinned him in between two separate walls, and he was kind of pinned like from waist down. And it took it took a couple of hours to actually get him out. And people that don't understand, how long it takes to be able to set something like this up and make something like this successful. What you don't see on this picture is the rest of the wall that's in danger of collapsing, that needed to be shored up, and what's happening on the exterior of that building to keep the rest of that wall stabilized. A lot of things go into play to be able to have an effective rescue operation. This was one of the, like I said, 33 or 34 responses that we went on this past year. But what's interesting and what's great about what we do is that when we're about to run a drill, we have an annual drill and exercise that we run. It's going to be Friday, October 11th, and Saturday, October 12th. And what we do is when we have these drills, we bring all the fire departments that are, the 11 fire departments plus Port Authority of New York and New Jersey. But what we do is we set up the training so that the time and date that you're conducting the training, you're only conducting the training with the guys that are on your shift. And not just within your department, but within the other departments as well. So what happens is, if you get like today is our group 4. I know you said A, B, C, and D for some of the other departments. For us, it's 1, 2, 3, and 4. Today it's group 2. Tomorrow's group 3. I'm the tour commander for tomorrow. So the guys that are working today, if they go on a UAC call, if they go on one of these Metro Strike Team calls, they're going to see all the familiar faces there. All the guys that they train with all year round. Those are the same guys that they're going to see. The guys that they work with at the drills, those are the guys that they're going to see at the actual incident. And that's super important because it builds that camaraderie, it builds that trust. You know this guy, you've worked with him before, you know what their capabilities are. And so you're getting 11, depending on the size and scope of the incident. Of course, it may not be all 11, but you're getting 11 specialized units with all the same equipment, same type of truck, same type of experience, the same type of training, responding to these incidents to get the job done. In addition to that, we have a couple other departments that have shoring units and shoring trucks, lumber trucks. We happen to have one of them as well. So you'll have a cache of equipment on a piece of apparatus that you can basically build or tear down a house. There's so much stuff on this thing, but yeah, and that's one of the pictures from one of our recent incidents.
And we'll go to the second one. And this one's pretty self-explanatory.
Yeah, what's the reason why I said this one is because this is very typical of what we have in the North Hudson area as far as our wood frame structures. And believe it or not, the space that you see in between so for us, we call the front the A side, and then what FDNY would call the 2 side is our B, and then C, D, so on and so forth. So what the space that you see between the fire building and those 2 exposures, that's a lot of space compared to what we normally have in the North Hudson area. A lot of the structures that we have are attached. A lot of them have maybe a 5 foot, 3 foot alleyway in between. But wires in front of buildings. This happens to be off of Tunnelly Avenue, so it's a pretty steep hill from Tunnelly Avenue to this street here. But very typical of what we have as far as tight streets, tight quarters, very, very densely populated. Anytime we have a top floor fire, we always have a situation where we have wires in front of the building, right? So you have to, think about what else are we going to do? Put ground ladders up on the other sides of the building, ground ladders up to the rear, and not that you're getting creative, but you have to be able to think on the fly, a lot of times. So that's why I put that picture in there. But you can see the siding off of the melting off of the what we call the delta, the D exposure on the right there. Because of the exposure issues, we got lucky here because underneath the vinyl siding was asphalt siding, and asphalt has a fire retardant property to it. I think that if it was, asbestos siding. Had it been asphalt siding, it would have been a different story. I think it would have definitely lit up. But yeah, this was asbestos siding underneath the vinyl, which has a fire retardant property to it. And if you go back for a second, what's crazy about these? So if you look that fire building and the other buildings there to the right, they look identical in nature. And if you look at the buildings on the right, you can kind of see on the roof line that you have a definite attic. Mm-hmm. In the fire building, there is no attic. That's what's called a Hollywood front. And so there, it's just a false wall. So you think that you have an attic up there, but there is no attic up there. So essentially, if you can, it's a flat roof behind that, what looks like a peak. So extremely important to be able to, conduct a 360, walk around, get reports from the rear, because you could be in front of the building and think you have one thing, but now you walk around the side or the back, and you have something completely different. So you can't take for granted, what you see on the fire ground.
And that brings us to photo number 3, this is a building collapse, I'm assuming.
That's a building collapse. I think that was, I want to say that was in 2018. And I think it was East Orange, but that was one of my first operations as a chief of rescue operations that we responded to. That was a full response. This happened late at night. There was reports of people that had been walking down that sidewalk. That building was under renovation, and when it collapsed, and there was a threat of So what you don't see is in front of that dumpster there were cars that were buried underneath the rubble. So this was something where we had a full scale Metro USAR strike team activation. And then when we got there, we realized that we needed the assistance of Task Force One, and we called out for New Jersey Task Force One to bring out the search dogs. The search dogs started hitting on a scent, but it turned out to be nothing. But you get an idea of the size and scope of some of these incidents, and the amount of resources that it takes to be able to get something like this done, and the fact that all these departments work together and they're all different departments, not all the same, is a testament to the amount of training and preparedness that we have as a committee and as a resource throughout the state of New Jersey.
Photo number 4, and it's the same thing. Fox alarm.
No, this is I don't know if you recognize that guy with the white mustache to my right. That's Mickey Conboy.
Familiar.
Mickey Conboy.
Yes.
This was when they invited us out to the Rock, and we had that managing the Mayday training after about a month or two after the Newark ship fire, and I was able to have to my left is Captain Ruiz, who's a captain of my rescue, and then off behind him or off to the side of him, that's Chief Mo Valdez, who's my 2nd Battalion chief. So these are the guys that are my special ops, guys. So I was excited to be able to have them come out to FDNY and train with these guys, and we're definitely grateful for the experience that we have with them. But what they have there at the Rock is just amazing. It's better than anything I've ever seen. It's a playground, and I wish we can get out there every single day and train. But just being out there and seeing the way that they have everything set up and being able to actually handle an incident, even though it was during training, but be able to get on the radio, be able to be the incident commander, get on the roof with the guys and see how they do, rope rescue and this, that, and the other, and then be part of it. Was such a great learning experience. And look, I don't care who you are. You never stop learning. I think that, if you think you're an expert at something and you know everything, you're fooling yourself, put your ego aside and put your pride aside and go and ask questions and ask for help and it'll pay dividends in the future.
Mickey Conboy, of course, with Top Floor Tactics. That's why I'm like, okay, click as soon as you said the name. I know him by name, but not necessarily always by face. But yeah, he runs great.
What a great guy. What a class act.
Classic guy for sure. Photo number 5, please. Produce picture. Well, that's the logo.
Yeah, and that's our logo. That's our Special Operations Command logo that I had one of my firefighters, Timmy Kalachi, who happens to be the president for the union, the firefighters union. He helped me put this patch together, and department approved it, and the guys wear it with pride. And I'm very proud of the guys in the Special Operations Command units. These guys are motivated. They're always looking for an opportunity to train. They don't complain. Well, they complain a little bit, but we all do a little bit, right? But these guys are self-motivated, and some of the best special operations operators that I would put up against anybody in the country.
And the final photo, please.
Well, I'm glad that there was a question about the rescue truck that or being part of the apparatus purchasing. That's the rescue truck that we just bought. So that's our frontline rescue truck. That's the rescue one that rides to all the working fires, reported fires, motor vehicle accidents, things of that nature. But we also have a rescue truck that's our special rescue or special operations rescue truck, Rescue 2, that would respond out of town as part of the UAC Metro Urban Strike Team. In addition to that, we also have a lumber truck that we would respond out as well. So that's one of the rescue companies in our fleet.
It's a beautiful looking truck. And thanks.
Yeah, it's a nice truck.
Yep. It's a very nice truck. I could see why you wanted the black bumpers. It looks fine as is, but that black bumper would have given it the extra kick,
Yeah, but, absolutely. It is what it is.
Yeah, now listen, as we said, it's a beautiful truck as is. So now this brings us to the rapid fire. Again, great conversation. We covered a lot tonight. And this rapid fire consists of 5 hit and run questions from me, 5 hit and run answers from you. Now, one of them, or to be fair, actually 2 of them you already answered, which is advice you'd give newly promoted fire officers. I won't ask you that. And also best advice, you've also answered that in depth tonight. So we'll ask you 3 of the 5. And the first one is funniest call.
Um, so it wasn't that funny at the time, but when I explained what happened to my wife and my kids, they had a good laugh about it. Cats don't like to be rescued. And I'm not a cat person. I'm a dog person. So don't, if there's any cat people in the room, don't get upset. But I don't think cats need to be rescued. I think you leave them alone. They'll figure it out. You get a call for a cat in a tree. They got up there. They'll find their way down. But there was we had a fire, and there was a good amount of carbon monoxide throughout the building. I mean, the carbon monoxide was pretty high. So you had this lady that was frantic because her cat was upstairs, this, that, and the other. Um, and she was an elderly lady, and that's all she had was her cat. So I'm a new captain. I'm like, all right, I'll go up there with my guys. We'll grab the cat. So get into the apartment, and I'm looking around, and I'm looking in all the usual places that you would think to find a cat, right? And I see something from the corner of my eye in the bedroom, and I see something moving. I was like, a cat's in the bedroom. So go into the bedroom, and when I get in there, I tell the guys, I go, close the door so the cat doesn't get out. But the guys close the door and stay on the other side of the door and leave me inside the room with the damn cat. So I'm like, all right. So now, and I'm glad they did, because I'm glad they didn't see what happened. But I'm chasing this damn thing. This thing is jumping on top of dressers, climbing up the curtains. I mean, this thing is going crazy. And I'm like just trying to grab this cat and bring him out with me. So now I'm like, I don't care what happens. I'm walking out with this cat. And so he goes under the bed. I flip the mattress over, the thing's there. And make a long story short, I ended up like suplexing or something. I ended up jumping on top of this thing because as I had grabbed the cat at one point, and I don't know how this cat bit through my gloves, or, it just did not want to go anywhere. So finally I grabbed this cat, and now I'm holding him, and I'm walking out, and I'm thinking to myself, yeah, there's going to be a picture of me walking out with this cat. I'm going to be a hero, so on and so forth. The cat freaking jumps out of my arms again, jumps right back so the guys are out there laughing at me, and they're like, hey, did you think about having the lady come up here and just, once the carbon monoxide is gone, and just maybe using the fan to clear the carbon monoxide, and once it's clear, maybe having her come up here and get the cat herself? I'm like, you know what? I didn't even think about that. I'm like, I was so focused on trying to complete this task and get it done that I didn't think of the obvious. And then sometimes you just got to think of the obvious and say, you know what, the hell with it. And I don't know. That's probably the only thing I could think of that's a funny call, because my kids still like to hear the story of the cat that did not want to be rescued, but this cat did not want to be rescued, man. He really didn't. And it is what it is. Yeah.
They are a very stubborn species. And that brings us to the second question of the rapid fire: most uplifting call.
Yeah, that's a good one. I think I can't think of one specific uplifting call. What I think of as being most uplifting on our day-to-day operations and day-to-day calls is the look that the kids give you when they see you walking in or walking out. And it could be a small kitchen fire, or it could be an alarm activation, or it could just be something at a school that you go to. And the look that these kids give you of like complete admiration, and you could be the worst firefighter in the world, or you could hate your job, or whatever the case is, but these kids look up to us. Like, no matter what, they're looking up to us. So anytime that I go on a call that there are small children or kids, and they look at you, and they look at you as like a hero, to me, that's uplifting in itself. And it kind of reminds you why you do what you do. And it should remind you that they're watching, and you should conduct yourself as such, because you're being watched, and you're whether you want to or not, you're serving as an example for these kids. You hear all the time, like sports athletes and music stars and whatever, and they talk about how they're not, they don't want to be role models, but we don't really have that option. If a kid looks up to you for whatever reason, you're the role model, and you got to conduct yourself as such. I just saw something interesting. It said, and I wish I came up with this because it's awesome. It says that the name on your helmet, on your shield, represents who hired you. The name on your back, meaning your coat, represents who raised you, right? So your department, your kids. When you're out there in public view, conduct yourself as such, because you're representing those two things. You're not representing yourself. So I thought that was excellent to, it kind of I just remembered it right now as I was talking, because of the fact that, with the uplifting call, we have to remind ourselves that people are watching us, and if you're in it for the right reasons, then when you see the look on these kids' faces, or an old lady when get her cat, right, or any other call, that should be rewarding in itself. We shouldn't be looking for like a big reward or a medal or something like that for doing what we're supposed to be doing every day.
That's simple things. Even if the cat doesn't want to be rescued, what can you do? And the last question of the rapid fire, and this is one that you can say multiple. You don't have to say one. Favorite firehouse meal?
Yeah, favorite firehouse meal is Jack Rizzo, retired firefighter. He used to make this escarole and beans soup. Right? He would do this. He'd say, "Oh, I'm gonna make scuttle and beans," but he would put spicy sausage, chopped up pieces of spicy sausage, and big ass chunk. Excuse my language. Big chunks of chicken into this soup. Right? But what was crazy about it was that it was such a comfort food. And so he would start this thing in the morning and make a big witch's cauldron pot, of this thing, of the soup. And we'd have it for lunch, just the soup as it is with bread. And then for dinner, he'd make some macaroni and you have it with macaroni. But he would sit in the firehouse kitchen in his bunker pants all day, cooking this thing. And this was before we talked about cancer prevention and that kind of stuff. I mean, so just to put some context, before somebody says, "Oh, you shouldn't be wearing your gear in the fires." Yes, you're right. I agree 100%. But at the time, we weren't having those conversations. At the time, we weren't having those conversations. He would just sit in his bunker pants all day, ready to go. And that was just him. But he would make this delicious pot of soup, man. It was so good that I ended up having to get his recipe, and I've tried to make it a few times. I've never made it as good as him, but that's probably my favorite firehouse meal. And then on Sundays, on Sundays it's sauce or gravy, whatever you want to call it. Wherever it is that you're from in the region, with sausage and meatballs, and especially during the football season, that's usually the go-to on most firehouses on a Sunday. So those are things I look forward to.
All right, well said. And that covers everything. This has been a great conversation. Of course, stick around. We'll talk off air. Before I say goodbye to the audience, any shout outs to anything or anyone you want to give, Chief?
Yeah, I want to give a shout out to my partners at Promotional Prep, Mike Turpak, Frank Montaigne. I want to tell everybody that's taking our classes, good luck on your upcoming firefighter exams, and we just did a program for company officers, the guys that are taking the lieutenants and captains exams. Good luck on your exams as well. Want to give a shout out to New Jersey Task Force 1. They're out there right now. They got deployed out as a FEMA team to help out and be on standby. Be safe out there. Captain Ruiz, who's my rescue captain, he's out there with them. Bunch of great guys out there. So good luck to all you guys and be safe. And then that's it. And to my family, they're not watching. They're probably not going to watch, but they're the reason why I do what I do. My wife and my kids.
Well said. Shout out indeed to New Jersey Task Force 1, and also to my friends in New York Task Force 1, both those of you in the FDNY side and those of you representing the NYPD Emergency Service Unit. Be safe down there, boys. As Hurricane Helene upgraded to Category 3 today, makes its way through the South. All right, coming up next on the Mike the New Haven podcast, two really exciting shows that I've been working on for quite a bit. With the last name like Butcher, you might as well be a medical examiner, and she was for many years. She even wrote a book about it. Barbara Butcher, who will join me this Monday, and particularly she'll discuss her work after 9/11, which was not an easy task, but she was highly involved in that, amongst many other notable cases. And next Friday, I think he's currently CAR 12 in the FDNY, Assistant Chief, and heads up their Safety Division, Mike Myers. And I've been working on Chief Myers for a while, so I'm looking forward to that one. That'll be the best of the bravest interviews with the FDNY's elite next Friday, 6 p.m. Eastern Time this Monday with Medical Examiner Butcher, Eastern Standard Time at 6 p.m. as well. In the meantime, let me introduce the outro song. For those of you listening on the audio side tonight, I can't speak anymore. Friday brain, folks. It's been a long day. It's a song that was quite poignant after the events of 9/11, and it doesn't need much of an introduction. It's Bruce Springsteen with The Rising, so enjoy that for those of you on the audio side. In the meantime, on behalf of producer Victor and current Special Operations Deputy Chief Al Pratts, this has been Volume 4, The Best, the Bravest nationwide. I'm Mike Colón. We'll see you next time, and have a great week, everybody, and be safe.